In 1905, a tomb that had been sealed for over 3,500 years was discovered by Egyptologists. Nothing like it had been found before in the Valley of the Kings. The tomb belonged to the great-grandparents of Tutankhamun. Yet who were these non-royal people who owned a tomb in the Royal Valley? Two high-powered Egyptian nobles that worked for the Pharaoh.
Oh my gosh. We see Amenhotep III as a baby here.
Their children were destined for greatness.
This tomb was not made for iron.
A modest tomb that was filled with some of the greatest treasures ever found. This couple helped shape the future of ancient Egypt. Though today we know almost nothing about them. Join me, Curtis Ryan Woodside, as we discover Tuya and Yuya. Tuya and Yuya, the great-grandparents of Egypt's most well-known pharaoh, Tutankhamun. They lived at the time when Egypt's religion and daily life was on the brink of changing forever. But who were they really? They may have been instrumental in the restructuring of the Egyptian royalty. For a century now, people have been misled into believing that the only intact tomb in the Valley of the Kings was that of Tutankhamun. But that is false. Before we had King Tut, there was Tuya and Yuya. They were buried in the Valley of the Kings, and their joint tomb contained some of the most beautiful artifacts ever discovered. How come these two individuals were allowed to be buried in one of the most sacred sites in Egypt's New Kingdom around 3,400 years ago? What makes them so special to be buried alongside pharaohs and royals? They have been pulled through many conspiracy theories in the modern age, from being likened to the biblical Joseph and Moses. Yet, these are mostly found to have no bounding in archaeological facts. We want to discover who they really were. The story of Tuya and Yuya begins in around 1397 BC in Luxor. Thutmose IV is pharaoh and ruling over all Egypt. Thutmose IV focused on many military campaigns during his reign, maintaining and expanding Egypt's empire south and northwards. He famously made peace with the people to the north, known as the Mitanni, who lived in northern Syria. Thutmose made several attempts at peace. Finally, the Mitanni king Artatama agreed. Artatama sent his daughter to marry the pharaoh, and thus linking Egypt and Mitanni. The princess from Mitanni that the pharaoh married can be linked as Mutemwiya, since his other two wives have known parentage and did not bear children. Mutemwiya would go on to give birth to the next pharaoh of Egypt. On this scene, we can see Amenhotep III on the lap of Amun. We see Amenhotep III as a baby here. He is on the lap of his spiritual father, Amun. This is shown happening after his mother, Mutemwiya, has conceived the next pharaoh with the god Amun. There is suggested evidence that Yuya was the brother of Mutemuya. The spelling of Yuya's name is believed to be un-Egyptian and rather of Semitic origins, ending with the Ya sound, similar to Mutemuya. There are also stone scarabs which suggest that Yuya was brought to Egypt because of his excellent way with training horses. The introduction of horses and chariotry to Egypt originated from their northern neighbors after all. For Yuya to have been sent to Egypt with Mutemuya would not have been a strange thing, as often when foreign princesses were sent to marry the pharaoh, they would arrive with many staff and family members. Yuya started his career in Egypt as the master of horses, as listed on many of his objects found in his tomb. A magnificent chariot was found in Yuya's tomb, made from wood, leather, and gold. His chariot shows signs of being used, however, for more ceremonial parades rather than battles, showing Yuya's status within politics. It would be at the city of Akhmim where Yuya was given a very grand title. He was named as the prophet of the god Min at the temple there. It would be here in Akhmim that Yuya was to meet his wife, Tuya. Tuya was a noble Egyptian woman. She was the sister of the secondary wife of Thutmose IV. Tuya and Yuya both served in the temple of Min at Akhmim. A splendid wooden statue of Tuya was found in Akhmim, which reveals more about her roles. At the Louvre in Paris, amongst their vast Egyptian collection, is a statue of Tuya from Akhmim. A beautiful wooden representation of Tuya, shown wearing a long dress, large wig, and holding the necklace of the goddess Hathor. The statue states that Tuya was a singer of Hathor, as well as the entertainer of the god Min. Yet a title on the statue will give us a clue as to how Tuya and Yuya would manage to secure their place within the royal family. Tuya was the overseer of the pharaoh's harem in Akhmim. This title meant that she could possibly have a significant role in the choosing of the consort for the next pharaoh. Tuya and Yuya's first child was named Ti. Being the overseer of the harem in Akhmim, it would not be uncommon for Tuya to place her daughter into the service of the pharaoh. In 1401 BC, Mutemuya and Thutmose IV welcomed a son named Amenhotep. Tuya, whose daughter was a few years older than Amenhotep, started to make the moves to introduce Ti to Amenhotep, who would become the next pharaoh once Thutmose IV dies. In 1388 BC, Amenhotep III became pharaoh. Presumed to have been between the age of 6 and 12, the chief of the pharaoh's harem, Tuya, through clever moves, had then married her daughter, Ti, to Amenhotep. Thus, Tuya and Yuya were now fully cemented into the royal family, as their daughter was queen. There was much excitement around the new royals. They issued over 200 announcement stone scarabs announcing the marriage of Amenhotep III to Queen Ti, and they even mentioned Ti's parents, Tuya and Yuya. Queen T was only a few years older than Amenhotep, and it appears that they may have had some sort of co-regency for T to be able to assist in the rule of the land. Queen T's status can be seen at the tombs at Asasif in Luxor.
Oh my gosh. Look at Queen T over here. Look at the fineness of this detail. Up here, we can tell which pharaoh this is. Neb Ma'et Ra, Amenhotep. This is Amenhotep III, the father of Akhenaten. He is being protected by Hathor. Here she is, and behind is one of my favorite queens. Just look how beautiful and elegant she is, with the double cobra uraeus on her crown. This is Queen T. She is the mother of Akhenaten, one of the strongest women in ancient Egypt. In this Asasif tomb, we can see Amenhotep III wearing a beautiful leopard print shirt. On this side is the beautiful Queen T with her long blue braided wig. Here on the throne is Queen T, represented as a sphinx. That is just such a great little detail. And she is stepping on the head of a Nubian man. She's pulling him up as a sphinx. She's stepping on him. Below, you can see two captives that are tied up underneath the queen. And here, these are the different enemies of Egypt, all tied up. Asiatics, Africans, you can see a Libyan man all tied up, an Assyrian man over here, and here a Nubian man. You can rarely see how the ancient Egyptians showed the differences, just from subtle changes in the face, skin tone. It's really quite amazing the amount of detail the Egyptians showed to show themselves the differences between all the enemies.
Tuya was given a new post in Luxor, still as overseer of the harem and also chantress of the goddess Hathor. Yuya was also given a new promotion. He was named as chief advisor to Amenhotep III. Thus, he would have a big role in forming the pharaoh's reign from a young age. Other scenes from the period would lead us to believe that Yuya would have worked closely with Amenhotep and educated him on several subjects. Much like Merira, who educated Si-Atum, the brother of Amenhotep. Yuya was also given the title now of Father of the God's Body, to refer to his daughter becoming the great royal wife of Pharaoh. And once Pharaoh Amenhotep had grown up a bit, Yuya became the lieutenant of the army. With their daughter now becoming a flourishing young queen of Egypt, and their new positions in the royal court, Tuya, Yuya, and the whole family moved from Akhmim and settled in Luxor, Thebes, or Waset, as it was referred to at the time. Luxor had several places where royals could live. It was a sprawling city filled with the largest temples, vast agricultural land, and expansive villages, each with their residents having their key roles to fulfill. Queen T lived in the palace complex at Mechataten on the Theban West Bank. It is possible that Tuya and Yuya would have lived in this palace near their daughter. There certainly was enough room. However, they may have rather been housed at a village just down the road from Mechataten named Pen Sheshen Aten, the very same village where many of the treasures from their period were crafted. We know that Tuya and Yuya lived lavishly, even more so now that their daughter was queen. Many pieces of furniture from their tomb revealed just how opulent their living standards were, a real window into the daily lives of noble ancient Egyptians. Like these 12 woven sandals, a blue and gold wooden box which contained a wig for Tuya with the cartouches of Amenhotep III on the lid. An exquisite throne made from wood, gilded in gold leaf. The sides of the throne are adorned with the god Bes and the goddess Tawaret. Framed by Minoan-style waves is a scene on the backrest of Queen T with a pet cat sitting under her throne. The classic ancient Egyptian combination of black and gold on this ebony chair with its seat woven from reeds, adorned with 3 keys of life and a gazelle on the side. Contrary to common belief, the ancient Egyptians did have cushions and pillows, as seen by this marvelous example of a cushion from the tomb of Tuya and Yuya, which would have been placed on one of these chairs. This throne, however, did not belong to Tuya and Yuya. It belonged to their grandchild, Sit Amun, the daughter of Amenhotep III and Queen T. The elegant throne contains 2 busts of Sit Amun. It was most likely designated for the tomb by Sit Amun herself as a way to connect with her grandparents in the afterlife. The backrest shows the princess seated while she is being given gifts from various regions of Egypt. The scene continues on the armrests. The outer side shows the god Bes wielding a knife but also playing the drum. The jewelry boxes of Tuya and Yuya rival those of their great-grandson Tutankhamun. With beautifully inlaid panels of lapis and gold, these would have contained jewelry that was used in their everyday life. The lids feature the god of eternity with his arms stretched out holding palm reeds, and the glyphs for life, strength, and prosperity.
Tuya and Yuya were interred with some of the finest beds. In fact, in ancient Egypt, beds were literally apotropaic devices constructed to facilitate a blissful sleep. And if we have a look at Tuya Yuya's beds, they all have these adorable lion feet. They weren't meant to be adorable. They were meant to actually protect the sleeper. Now, the ancient Egyptians, they understood that sleep was conducive to good health because we see remedies for insomnia, but they also feared sleeping and dreaming because they didn't understand the neurological implications of sleep as we do today. So for the ancient Egyptians, they thought that during sleep they would be visited by unwanted demons and even people that had died. So they did everything to protect themselves. And if we have a look at Tuya and Yuya's beds, they're also adorned by these images of the goddess Tawaret and the god Bes. Now, both of these deities seem to appear together quite a lot because they were household favorites. Bes is particularly interesting because he was the god of everything that was fun, everything to do with dancing and music and drinking and general partying. But he was also a protective deity that would ward off evil spirits and obviously protect the dreamer while they're sleeping. So he was depicted with achondroplasia, which is commonly known as dwarfism. Sometimes he's seen brandishing a knife and a sword, sometimes playing a musical instrument. Tawaret was a very unusual looking deity. She had the head of a hippopotamus, the tail of a crocodile, and the limbs of a lion. She also had pendulous human breasts, so very unusual looking. She was a household favorite. She would also ward off evil demons and spirits. And she's also a deity that women would have to protect them during childbirth. So both had very similar functions. Now, it's understandable why the ancient Egyptians would fear sleeping, because if we think about it, when we're sleeping, the muscles become paralyzed, irregular heartbeat, accompanied with hallucinations. So we're literally seeing things that aren't there. So we understand these now as nightmares or parasomnias or just regular dreaming. Before the ancient Egyptians, they probably were responsible for early myths about life after death and even demons. So it's understandable why they would have wanted to protect themselves. And Tuya and Yuya had the perfect beds to ensure this blissful sleep.
Even the other family members of Tuya and Yuya were climbing the ladder. Their son and Queen T's brother, Anan, was named as the Chancellor of Lower Egypt in Heliopolis, north of now Cairo. Here, Anan served as the prophet of Amun, as well as the chief astronomer of Pharaoh. He is mentioned on the side of Tuya's coffin, and his statue, now in Turin, shows him dressed as a high priest wearing a dress covered in stars. Tuya and Yuya had another son named Ai. Although many Egyptologists are still on the fence about this, there are slight traces of his name on Tuya's coffin. Ai was born in Akhmim and would go on to inherit all of Yuya's roles and titles, as well as extending the temple of the god Min at Akhmim. In the city of Akhenaten, Ai's titles are visible in his tomb, where he is also named as the father of the god's body, which would link him to being the famous Nefertiti's father. Ai's secluded tomb in Luxor, adjacent to the Valley of the Kings, offers almost no clues, as it was so badly damaged.
So if you have a look at these cartouches, you can literally see that they've been chiseled out, and Ai's name has been removed after his death, and it's probably because this tomb was not made for Ai.
It would be Ai that would be the vizier and succeed the great-grandson of Tuya and Yuya, Pharaoh Tutankhamun. In 1375 BC, life was great for the royal family, and most of Egypt, in fact. Amenhotep and T had been running the country with diplomacy rather than war. They had made alliances with much of their neighboring countries, and the tributes to them were overflowing with gold and treasures. Egypt was at peace with the world, and its inhabitants were thriving. Yet it would be this year that Tuya would die. And only 1 year later, in 1374 BC, Yuya also died. We get the idea that the two were very much in love in life, and maybe he could not go on living without his lovely Tuya by his side, a feeling many know too well even today. Amenhotep and T offered them a tomb in the Valley of the Kings, a bold move, as prior only pharaohs and certain royals were buried there. Unlike other nobles who had extravagantly decorated tombs, with some of the finest details of Egyptian afterlife on display, these people weren't even related to the royals. Yet, Tuya and Yuya did not have a single decoration in their tomb, even stranger for the Valley of the Kings. The tomb is actually roughly cut inside, and it is probable that the tomb was started shortly after Tuya's death to place her mummy inside before the 70 days ancient custom for mummification had passed. And thus, when Yuya died a year later, there would be almost no time at all to complete their tomb. However, being buried in the valley was already an honor. Their tomb was filled with some of the most beautiful artifacts ever found. But why, unlike other tombs in the valley, was their tomb not robbed and emptied out? You see, contrary to common belief, the tomb of their great-grandson Tutankhamun had actually been broken into in antiquity. Hundreds of years after Tutankhamun was laid to rest, Egypt fell into a decline, and the desperate public began robbing tombs to steal the gold to sell. The tombs in the Valley of the Kings were under guard, and it would appear that the men that broke into Tut's tomb were caught in the act. Though they had enough time to rummage through the first chamber, yet they were caught before they could get away with the pharaoh's treasures. The same thing occurred to Tuya and Yuya's tomb. In 1905, on the 5th of February, their tomb was discovered by James Quibell and Theodore Davis. A steep descending passageway was found. The opening was too steep and narrow for a grown man to enter. They got a young Egyptian boy to jump down. He emerged moments later holding 3 beautiful treasures: a small piece of a chariot, a walking stick, and a stone scarab gilded with gold. This stone was the heart scarab of Yuya that once hung around his mummy's neck. This scarab was covered in prayers intended to help him reach the afterlife, to be used in the weighing of the heart ceremony before the god of the afterlife, Osiris. But why were there such precious objects laying in the descending corridor? Tuya and Yuya's tomb showed evidence that it had been robbed indeed. However, it appears that, like their great-grandson, the intruders in the tomb were caught in the act of robbing. They were interrupted by the guards and obviously dropped some objects on the floor while fleeing away. Thankfully, the robbery was stopped, because today we can marvel at their splendid treasures. A few days later, on the 13th of February, after clearing the doorway, Theodore Davis entered the tomb of Tuya and Yuya. He described this event as such: "The chamber was as dark can be, and extremely hot. We held up our candles, but they gave so little light and so dazzled our eyes that we could see nothing except the glitter of gold." They had just witnessed one of the most spectacular discoveries in archaeological history, many years before Howard Carter saw Tutankhamun. Their fears of a break-in were confirmed inside. The tomb was in array. The coffins had been opened and objects were scattered all around. Even the mummies of Tuya and Yuya had been partially unwrapped Clearly, the ancient robbers had been looking for the amulets and jewels before they were interrupted. And like their famous great-grandson, Tuya and Yuya also had exceptionally beautiful gold death masks. Yuya's mask was of a more simple design, gold with lapis, quartz and obsidian eye inlays. He is depicted wearing a simple headcloth, and his ears are not pierced, much like his mummified body. Not having pierced ears was uncommon for Egyptians, thus giving more evidence that Yuya was foreign. Tuya's mask was gold. She also has inlaid eyes, yet the collar is bejeweled with some of the most colorful and precious stones. She is wearing a large wig with the crown of a lotus flower on her brow. Her linen wrappings were secured with resin, which the residue is still showing through. These beautiful masks were once upon their mummified faces in order for the gods to recognize them on their journey to enter the next life. And to help them into their next life was their Book of the Dead. At 20 meters long, it is one of the longest and best preserved pieces of papyrus that has ever been discovered. The beautifully illustrated papyrus contains many spells and prayers to help Tuya and Yuya to be welcomed by Osiris. Yuya would have been planning his Book of the Dead from the moment he could afford it. Showing his age, he has white hair, however, a black beard. Featured on the papyrus is a scene showing the funeral of Yuya taking place, his sarcophagus on a sledge being pulled by bulls and arriving during the opening of the mouth in front of his tomb. With white hair, wearing a fine white linen dress, is Yuya receiving offerings from two priests. One gives him linen, while the other cleanses him with water.
In Egyptian iconography, a person's ba or soul was depicted as a human-headed bird. The ba was considered important in the afterlife because it would visit the world of the living during the day and the world of the deceased during the night. Another piece to connect Yuya to this life and the next was his very own ba bird shown on his papyrus, as well as a beautiful statuette with a small beard and black wig. He wears a beige tunic and a heart scarab held by a lapis and gold necklace, the same one that was found in his tomb, meaning we can expect Yuya to have presented himself like this. The ba was the spirit, an extension of the person. There's a ba bird.
Among many of the objects found were many shabtis. Their purpose was to make the life of the deceased easier in the next life. Basically, they were little servants. Each one contained specific texts written on their body that pertained to certain duties, and there was a chief shabti who controlled the other shabtis, as they all had their own little personalities. Intriguingly, many food parcels were found in the tomb containing cuts of beef. Many of these boxes were shaped like the food themselves. They also had several pottery vessels. However, they were painted to look like stone, almost imitating the style, and were decorated beautifully. A wreath of flower petals painted around the lid, or even a molded daisy on the top. These vases look rather out of place compared to what we know about ancient Egyptian pottery. These contained sacred oils, and on the lid they had different animals such as a cow, a goat, and a frog.
The Osiris bed discovered in the tomb of Tuya Yuya is really interesting. It's made of wood, reeds, clay, cloth, barley, and plants. Clay was placed in the shape of the body of Osiris, and then barley was planted into this. Beds such as this represented the concept of life springing from death, thereby denoting the resurrection of the god Osiris.
And symbolizing Tuya and Yuya's quest for eternity were their golden sarcophagi, like this one of Yuya. And another one painted with black stripes on it for Tuya. Their coffins were also nested, similar to Tut, and contained different levels of mummification processes and different decorations as you went further down towards the mummy.
Amongst the artifacts discovered in the tomb were the canopic boxes of Tuya and Yuya. During the New Kingdom period, canopic boxes were widely used to store the internal organs of the elite during the mummification process. Tuya's magnificent canopic box rests on a sledge. The vases containing the internal organs, when discovered, were tightly packed with cloth and little mummiform packets with gilt heads, and they were fixed in sawdust. Used canopic vases are all human-headed and not quite as exquisite as Tuya's. Each of the vases contain a package wrapped in cloth, nearly filling its cavity, some of which are too large to really allow the lids to settle into place. Tuya and Yuya's tomb is one of the tiniest in the Valley of the Kings. It's undecorated, uninscribed, and unremarkable compared to the lavishly decorated tombs of some of the pharaohs. However, the contents discovered within the tomb are remarkable and quite exquisite. When the tomb itself was discovered, there was a real fear of robbery, and to avoid this, the contents of the tomb were moved to Cairo with great speed. The day that this was decided was a particularly grueling day. The scorching heat was so debilitating that over half of the people that were employed to move the contents had given up by midday, and the rest of them powered on, and thanks to them we get to marvel at these beautiful artifacts in Cairo today.
All of these artifacts may be beautiful, yet the real treasure preserved in the tomb is not made of gold. I'm talking about the actual bodies of Tuya and Yuya. They are the most precious of all that was discovered in their tomb.
When Tuya and Yuya's mummified human remains were discovered, it was quite apparent that their bodies had been disturbed by ancient tomb robbers. Despite this, they were remarkably beautifully preserved, and it would be anatomist Grafton Elias Smith who would be assigned with studying them. I feel he was probably the right person for the job because his position as the first professor of anatomy at the Government Medical School of Cairo allowed him to actually study a lot of human remains that were excavated by archaeologists at the time. But his first real experience with Egyptian mummies would be when he was invited to study a pre-dynastic cemetery at Al-Amra. He actually was looking for naturally, perfectly preserved human brains. He would then go on to study a lot of the royal mummies. He also studied a lot of priests and even commoners. So he had a lot of experience, and this allowed him to really look at the evolution of mummification itself and the different practices during different time periods. When he's looked at the mummy of Yuya, he was taken back by how natural he looked, because a lot of the mummies that he'd studied, they'd sort of blackened because of the resin. With Yuya, he described his expression as very benevolent and very graceful looking man. Yuya had a lot of hair on his head, which would have been white during his lifetime, but the hair had turned this sort of yellowish blonde color, which is probably due to oxidative stress, protein degradation, and the embalming materials that were used. And we do see this in a lot of other mummies as well, where the hair sort of turned this blondish color. But with Yuya, it was very yellowish, more than blonde.
Blonde hair does seem to have become a trend in ancient Egypt. Several blonde human hair wigs have been found. At El Kab, tombs dating to the time around Tuya and Yuya, there are some images of people shown with yellow or blonde hair.
Look at her hair. I'm not quite sure if it has not been painted in with the black or whether she actually had this blonde hair, because we have examples of some Egyptians with blonde hair, and also we have examples of blonde hair being used for wigs. It's very rare, but there's a few. She could have been one of those few with blonde hair. Some tombs we even see the men with short cropped blonde hair, which could have been dyed with henna, but some of them really did have that blonde hair. But just look at her sitting here with her little round earrings, beautiful turquoise necklace. Unfortunately, her husband is gone here, but she is just magnificent.
The mummy of Yuya, his eyelashes were still intact, his eyebrows as well, and he had a bit of a stubble on his face, probably about 3 millimeters thick, which shows that he hadn't shaved before his death for a few days. His eyes had been packed with linen and resin, and once they were inserted, the eyelids were drawn over the linen. He also noticed that he had sort of subcutaneous packing in his face as well, which gave him this wonderful lifelike appearance. And he said that Smith describes his nose as prominent, aquiline, and with quite a high bridge. He was slightly smiling, which was beautiful to see. And he also noticed that his face was quite wrinkled. His hands were sort of resting just underneath his chin, his arms were flexed, and his body had actually been very tightly packed with lots of resin and linen. So the linen would have been soaked with resin, which starts off quite liquid. And trees actually produce resin when they're injured. It has antibacterial, antifungal properties. It also has a very sweet fragrance, so it's understandable why the Egyptians used resin. But once it's inserted in the body, it solidifies and becomes very glue-like. Smith also noticed that Yuya had a gold metal plate placed in the embalming incision. He basically wasn't very tall. He was about 5'5", which actually is not bad for an ancient Egyptian. One of his fingernails had a gold stole attached to it. This would have been to keep the nails in place. Unfortunately, he didn't work out the cause of death. And now when he went on to study Tuya, his wife, again he was taken back by how beautiful she looked. She was so lifelike and very naturally preserved. With Tuya, a lot of her wrapping was damaged, much more so than her husband. He actually got Douglas Derry to assist him with studying Tuya. Now, Douglas Derry is the anatomist that would go on to study their great-grandson Tutankhamun. Now, Derry noticed that in her feet she was wearing gold sandals, and underneath the soles were made of metal plate. There was also a hieroglyph design found within her wrappings in gold foil, which had her titles. She was described as a little old woman by Smith because, like her husband, she had white hair, but she was completely bald from the top, but had sort of wavy-ish hair on the sides and at the back. And she was actually wrinkle-free, so maybe it was a little bit unfair for them to call her a little old woman. But she was very short, under 5 foot tall, probably about 4'11". The latest CT scans of Tuya and Yuya gives a little bit more information. So with Yuya, it was confirmed that he had subcutaneous packing in his face, which gave him some great symmetry and a very natural looking appearance. He also had granular sort of material inside his neck and in his mouth. His brain had been extracted, so he'd gone through excerebration. But there was a little bit of brain residue left in his skull cavity. Now, once the brain was removed, resin had been introduced twice into his skull cavity. This would have probably been to preserve the integrity of the skull. Resin was also used, of course, for his fragrance and probably to trap insects that might have gone inside the skull cavity and really to lock in the brain residue as well. Now, with his nasal cavity, they also found resin in there as well. His teeth were in particularly poor condition. There was not just alveolar resorption, but there was a lot of attrition in his teeth. This is the wearing down of the teeth. The team found that he'd been eviscerated, but his heart was still retained in his body. Interestingly, his left big toe was missing, but this was most likely post-mortem. Unfortunately for the team, they couldn't find a cause of death. We don't know how he died. Now with Tuya, she was also determined to be around 50 to 60 years of age when she died. She had been completely excerebrated. Her brain had been removed through transnasal craniotomy, which is removal of the brain through the nose. And she did actually have a little bit of remnants of dura, which is the membrane that surrounds the brain. It's quite a tough membrane, and we see this in quite a few ancient Egyptian mummified individuals. She actually had her ears pierced, whereas Yuya didn't. There was no piercing in Yuya's ears. So Tuya, her left ear, actually had 2 piercings, and the right ear had 1, but she also had piercings on the top of her ears, which might have been in vogue at the time. Her mouth and upper throat were filled with linen, and just like Yuya, her teeth were in particularly bad condition. She had attrition and she had multiple missing teeth as well, so not great for her. She had also been eviscerated, but her heart had been retained in her body. And just like Yuya, her body cavity was filled with linen, which had been soaked in resin, so this has solidified. But she had also been packed with what looked like sand or mud as well. Unfortunately, just like Yuya, no cause of death could be determined. But what was discovered was a severe case of scoliosis, which would explain why she was so tiny, so she could have actually been a little bit taller in life.
And now, using the information from the CT scans of both Tuya and Yuya, I can do a facial reconstruction to see what they could have actually looked like. Tuya and Yuya would not have known their great-grandson Tutankhamun. They died just on the cusp of Egypt facing its most tumultuous time, a time that would shake the entire history of Egypt to the core. The religious revolution brought around by Akhenaten and their granddaughter Nefertiti, the glorious return of the old ways under their great-grandson Tutankhamun, and the succession by their son Ai. Maybe their deaths before these disturbing events was a blessing, so that they could die remembering the great splendor of the land they experienced. Tuya and Yuya may be almost unknown today. They were one of the most important couples in Egyptian history, and their shining legacy shall live on for eternity. Nefertiti, the iconic female face of ancient Egypt, living 3,500 years ago during an upheaval of ancient life, caused in part by her husband, Pharaoh Akhenaten. The identity of this woman has been cloaked in mystery since her rediscovery in the ruins of the city that she and her husband founded, Akhenaten, now called Amarna. Nefertiti is now believed to have been a fully fledged pharaoh, king to the throne after the uncertain death of Akhenaten. Yet, she was more than a queen, more than a ruler. Nefertiti was a mother. We know of 6 children born between Akhenaten and Nefertiti. It was these children that caused much controversy between Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and a secondary wife, Kia. Kia gave birth to the only male heir, now the world's most famous Tutankhamun. Nefertiti, on the other hand, had a string of female children. But who were these daughters of Nefertiti, and why do we not hear more about them? Where are their tombs and their treasures? Why did they die young, marry their father and brother? And what can we learn about their lives under their sheltered upbringing in the palaces of Akhenaten, closed off from the rest of the world? Did they agree with their parents' new religion? In 1912, German archaeologists were excavating at the desolate city of Amarna, where they discovered many intriguing objects from Nefertiti's life, stylized yet lifelike images of the queen, pharaoh, children, and other royal family members, most notably the bust of Nefertiti. Because the times were different in the early 1900s, many of these artifacts found at Amarna have been removed from Egypt and scattered far and wide across the world.
I've come here to the Neues Museum in Berlin, where they have the biggest collection of Amarna art in the world. And I'm finally going to come face to face with the children of Nefertiti to find out who they really were.
These are the daughters of Nefertiti and the sisters of Tutankhamun. Around 1352 BC, Amenhotep III was ruling Egypt. Though at quite an extended age, he probably had a co-regent, a formidable woman who had assisted Amenhotep III for many decades. In fact, many foreigners preferred to converse with this queen rather than the pharaoh. It was in one of these foreign letters from a king of the Hittites that he congratulated the queen on the birth of her grandchild,
Mechataten. This grandmother and queen was none other than Queen T. Amenhotep and T had several children, including a young prince, the future pharaoh, Akhenaten. They lived in Thebes, on the west bank in an opulent palace called Malkata. The son of T and Amenhotep III was named Amenhotep IV. However, shortly after his father's death, he changed his name from Amenhotep IV to Akhenaten. Amenhotep IV had married a young girl from a noble family, Nefertiti. Ancient textual evidence possibly names her father as a courtier of Amenhotep III and the brother of Queen T. His name was Ai. Toward the end of Amenhotep III's life, Akhenaten and Nefertiti had their first child together. They named her Mechataten. Her name means the one who makes the sun god Aten happy. By naming their daughter this, it was a foreshadowing of what religious changes were afoot. Mechataten would have known her grandfather Amenhotep III before he died, as she is shown at Karnak Temple with Nefertiti. Mechataten's father, Amenhotep IV, became pharaoh when her grandfather died. They only continued to live in Thebes for the next 4 years. Her father began to show less interest in the plethora of Egyptian gods, in particular Amun, to whom Karnak Temple was home. Her father showed more favor in one god only, named Aten, the life-giving sun disk. He founded a new capital miles north of Thebes and named it Akhenaten, meaning the horizon of the Aten. He even went as far as to remove his previous name, which mentioned the god Amun, and changed it to Akhenaten, meaning the servant of Aten. It would be in this new city that Mechataten was given her highest ranking positions. According to many, a northern palace at Akhenaten was built for a secondary wife of Akhenaten, whose name was later replaced with the name of Mechataten. Mechataten is depicted many times in the new city, where she is venerating the god Aten, along with her father Akhenaten and mother Nefertiti. A very close relationship is visible between Mechataten and Akhenaten during her younger years. On one scene, Akhenaten is shown gifting a golden earring to Mechataten. It is known that Akhenaten and Nefertiti had 6 children together, and only daughters. The secondary wife of Akhenaten, Kia, gave birth to the male heir Tutankhamun, then called Tutankhaten. This would have caused some friction between Nefertiti and Kia. Very soon after the birth of Tut, Kia disappears. Did she die of a plague that tormented the new city? Or was she removed by Nefertiti? Some believe that Mechataten, the half-sister of Tut, became his adoptive mother and raised him in the northern palace, which was formerly inhabited by Kia. Although the wet nurse of Tut was named Maya, some believe that Maya and Mechataten are one and the same, but this theory holds little factual evidence, even though many artifacts belonging to Mechataten were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, from a clothing chest to musical clappers containing the names of Mechataten and their grandmother, Queen T. Life in Akhenaten's new city was not the utopia that he had dreamed of. Plague swept through the town, foreign allies turned their backs, and the population were not as welcoming of the idea of only one main god as he had hoped. The final years of Amarna were very muddy, and much is still unknown. Nefertiti had become a co-regent with Akhenaten, but she appears to disappear in her older age. Perhaps she changed her name to the royal name of Nefernuaten. Out of the blue, a new co-regent arrives on the scene, around this time, named Smenkhara. Some even go as far as to suggest a bisexual relationship between Akhenaten and Smenkhara. Smenkhara became a short-lived pharaoh when Akhenaten died. High in the hills of Amarna, at the nobles' tombs, in one tomb of Meri Ra, Smenkhara is shown giving tribute to Meri Ra, along with Mechataten. In this tomb, we have a clear sign showing that Mechataten became great royal wife of Smenkhara. It is even possible that before things began to fall apart, that there were 4 rulers of Egypt at the same time: Akhenaten, Nefertiti, Smenkhara, and Mechataten. It is possible that she had given birth to 2 children, one sharing the same name as her mother, Mechataten. A tomb for Mechataten has never been found. A boundary stela of her father mentions that she shall be laid to rest in the family tomb in the eastern mountains, but no sign of Mechataten being buried there was ever found. We have no idea what the final fate of Mechataten was. A new female ruler appears, and the 2 former rulers, Smenkhara and Mechataten, disappear. Did they die from the plague that ravaged the city? Were they killed to make way for the abandonment of Amarna and a new young pharaoh who became Tutankhamun? Did they give up the throne and move back to Thebes with the entire population of Amarna? Or were they simply expelled and left in shame? One may never know. The second daughter of Nefertiti is named Mechataten, meaning protected by the Aten. Unsurprisingly, very little is known about Mechataten. She first appears in Thebes at Karnak, in a temple built by her father Akhenaten, just 3 years before the family moved to the new capital city. She is then mentioned in year 4 and 5 of Akhenaten on a boundary stela of Amarna. Therefore, we can deduce that she was around 7 years old at this time. This royal family are extremely close, and scenes show them in loving moments. Mechataten appears on the lap of Nefertiti in one scene, holding hands with her mother, while 2 of her other sisters also join in. Whereas Mechataten seems close with Nefertiti, her elder sister Mechataten appears closer with Akhenaten on the same scene. In the tomb of her grandfather, from Nefertiti's side, she is shown holding a tray of offerings towards Ai. When she was around 15 years old, she appears again in several Amarnan tombs, including the tomb of Hoi and Meri Ra. It is suggested that she married her father Akhenaten and became pregnant, but things seemed to end here for Mechataten. She died in year 14 of Akhenaten's reign, which means she was around 17 years old.
She was buried in a royal tomb at Amarna. Unlike the old view on death and rebirth in the next life, where you needed to appease several gods, Akhenaten believed you simply arrived in heaven and rose like the Aten sun from your devotion in this life. In the tomb of Mechataten, the sad reality of her death comes to light. Her entire family is shown grieving for her. In a moment of extreme sadness, she is shown deceased under a canopy. The significance of her under the canopy is heartbreaking. The canopy at this time symbolized childbirth. What we understand from this scene is that she tragically died during childbirth, a time that was most feared by many Egyptians. Although the tomb is very badly damaged, another scene shows Akhenaten and Nefertiti looking over the dead daughter, while Akhenaten holds Nefertiti by the arm. Outside of the room, we can see a woman holding a newborn child being covered with a royal fan. Many believe that this is the child that Mechataten gave birth to. Very few objects from Mechataten remain, yet one scribal palette can be marveled at, showing the name of Nefertiti and her daughter, Mechataten. A princess, a queen, a woman of the utmost terrible circumstances, the middle child of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. She is believed to have been born in Thebes very shortly before the royal family moved to the new city of Akhenaten, now Amarna. She was given the birth name of Ankhesenamun, which she later changed to Ankhesenamun when she veered away from her father's religion. In her early life, along with her two elder sisters, she became one of the principal priestesses of the Aten, and is often shown along with her two sisters. Akhenaten made it that the public had to worship the family, and in turn, the royals and mainly the Pharaoh would pass on your prayers to the god Aten. It is suggested that she was married to her own father, a practice at the time which was not unusual. She may have even given birth to an inbred child sharing the same name as herself. Yet the child died from the plague that wiped out half of the population of Amarna. When her father died, during the short period of rule under Smenkhara and Nefernuaten, Ankhesenamun was married to her slightly younger brother, Tutankhamun. Again, not strange practice at the time, as they believed that inbreeding would keep the family lines stronger, as well as the religious aspect where the Amarnan royals were divine in their own way. They could not marry out of the divine lineage. Ankhesenamun and Tutankhamun appeared to be very close. They are seemingly trained to be rulers by Nefertiti herself, if the theory is true that Nefertiti lived on past Akhenaten. They are also cared for by Nefertiti's father, Ai. After a few short years, Tutankhamun was crowned as Pharaoh when he was 9 years old, and Ankhesenamun was made the great royal wife, also known as Queen. Only 2 years into his rule, Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun abandoned their father's city and moved back to Thebes and reinstated Amun as the chief god of Egypt. To affirm that they were distanced from Aten now, they changed the epithets
of their names mentioning Aten to now mention Amun, becoming Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun. The close brother and sister were then stamping their mark in Thebes, being shown on statues and reliefs together in the two main temples of Thebes, Luxor Temple and Karnak. Ankhesenamun is often shown in loving scenes with her brother, some engraved in gold where she is seen hunting geese with Tutankhamun, others where he pours out wine for his sister queen. There is a loving scene on a wooden chest which is aptly known as their wedding scene. A young Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun are seen presenting each other with the lotus in a lush garden. Yet, the most famous of all of these scenes of the couple is on the throne of Tut, where Ankhesenamun is leaning forward, rubbing oils from a bowl onto her brother husband. We know that the couple tried to conceive an heir at least twice, yet these children suffered the same fate as her first child. Two mummified children from Tut and Ankhesenamun were found in Tut's tomb. Tutankhamun died around the age of 19 after a 9-year reign, having no children. This left Ankhesenamun in a predicament. Her grandfather I, Nefertiti's father, wanted to become the next pharaoh, yet we have evidence that Ankhesenamun did not want this. Here at the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, they have some really amazing examples of trade relations between Hittites and Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians had very good trade routes to the north, including people of the Hittites, Amurru, and Assyria. And they used to send letters between each other in the international communication language, which was written in cuneiform, sort of looks like little bird scratchings. And one of the most famous letters is that of Queen Nefertari, that she used to send letters to the Queen Pudahipa up in the north, and they had a very good rapport between themselves. But before Nefertari of Ramses II, Amenhotep III and Queen T used to send letters up there. Queen T was actually very instrumental in causing a good relationship between the two countries. However, as we go on, from Tel el Amarna, we have letters from Nefertiti and Akhenaten to the Hittites in the north. And this is where we see things start to crumble. During the time of Tutankhamun, he had very good trade relations at that time with the Hittites to the north. So much so that even Ankhesenamun wrote to the Hittites when Tut died and asked for one of their sons to be sent because she did not want to marry I, her possible grandfather, who was an old man. And some artifacts have been found, not in Egypt, out of Egypt, showing Tut and Ankhesenamun. And on the other side, the Assyrian lion goddess who is connected to Sekhmet. Shortly after her husband died and before I became king, she wrote a letter to the Hittites stating that she did not wish to marry the courtier and that the king of the Hittites should send one of his many sons for her to marry, and he shall become the pharaoh. Unfortunately, it appears that I was aware of this, and once the Hittite prince arrived in Egypt, he was executed. Ankhesenamun married I, whose first wife was dead already. A small ring showing the joint names of I and Ankhesenamun remains to tell this tale. Although I was in his late 70s and only ruled for a short time, during this short time, the then 20-something-year-old Ankhesenamun disappears from all records. Her fate is not known. The tomb of Ai in Thebes is thought to be the original burial place of Tut. However, Ai swapped the tombs, claiming the larger for himself. The decorations are very similar, and a scene in the tomb could be a final image of Ankhesenamun. Ai was an old man, yet on the wall there is a young man with the bodily features of Tutankhamun, and next to him is his great royal wife wearing the feathers of Amun. This scene would appear to be Tut and Ankhesenamun, yet their faces and names have been hacked out. This scene of the couple, showing them hunting geese, a symbolic image that was repeated several times by Tutankhamun and the unfortunate Ankhesenamun. Nefertiti's fourth daughter shares the same name as her mother. She is known as Nefernuaten Ta-Sherit, or the beauty of the Aten the younger. Nefernuaten Ta-Sherit is thought to have been born around year 9 of Akhenaten's rule. She does not appear in many scenes with the family, apart from one where she is shown as a young toddler sitting on a pillow playing with her younger baby sister. The entire Amarna family are shown on this fresco from the main palace. However, the only surviving intact scene is that of Nefernuaten Ta-Sherit. Since the other's feet are still visible on the fresco, artists have been able to reconstruct the scene to allow us to imagine how it initially looked. She does, however, make 2 brief appearances as a young princess in a noble's tomb at Amarna, where she is shown with her other sisters. She does not appear to have a high role in the family when it came to official duties, which is why she could possibly have only been shown in nobles' tombs. Nefernuaten Ta-Sherit was present at the death of her oldest sister, Mechataten, as she is included in the lineup of princesses mourning their sister's passing. This scene took place before the next 2 younger sisters were born, as they are not present on the scene. Many are uncertain of the ultimate fate of this princess. She may have been the Amarnan princess shown on several scenes without titles, as many believe she died before Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun took the throne. Neferure is either the possible twin sister of Nefernuaten Ta-Sherit, or she may have been born very soon after Nefernuaten Ta-Sherit. The thought behind them being twins is that they are both shown at what looks to be the same age on a palace fresco. Both princesses are shown bold, with their defined eyeliner, as well as being adorned in fine blue lapis and gold jewelry. Nefernuaten Ta-Sherit on the right, looking back at her sister, holding her under the chin, a loving image of Neferure and her sister. Neferure does not appear on many scenes with the royals. In the tomb of Meri Ra, she is shown with her sisters giving offerings to the overseer. Neferure is depicted holding a baby gazelle and a single lotus flower, while she still has her side lock, the sign of royal youth. The plague that swept through Amarna took many victims, including the other royals. One of the youngest victims to have befallen this fate was Neferure. The scene showing the death of Mechataten has the royal princesses present, all except one, Neferure. It is likely that she is not shown in mourning because she, like her elder sister, had died.
we have a small rose quartzite statue of Akhenaten, but this is the artist's draft. He's drawn onto the stone what he wants to create. This is unfinished, and this is great because it allows us to get an insight into how Akhenaten's artists created their art.
Towards the end of the Amarna period, much of the art was left unfinished. Like these two draft statues of two young Amarnan princesses, one clutching at a sistrum and a lotus. These two statues lead us closer to the idea that Nefernuaten Tasherit and Neferure were twins. The final glimmer of the life of the young princess was found in the tomb of her half-brother, Tutankhamun. Among the thousands of pieces discovered was a very small wooden box showing Tut's sister, Neferure, seated as a young child with her finger pressed to her mouth, a traditional pose for infants in the art of the Egyptians. Setabenra, the youngest and the last daughter of Nefertiti, whose name translates to chosen of the sun god Ra. Oddly, her name deviates from Aten slightly, yet still mentioning a solar deity. Could this have been a precursor to the dramatic reshift of religion and power in the country in the years to come? She was the last-born child to Akhenaten Nefertiti, who appeared to have been trying to conceive a male heir. Born in year 11 of Akhenaten's rule, Setabenra makes her final appearance while receiving foreign tributes with her parents and her sisters. She is the very last daughter shown on a carving in the tomb of Merira. This princess tragically died at the age of 6, before the death of Mechataten, as she appears nowhere on these key family moments. There are hundreds of statues, inlays, and ostraca showing the princesses of the Aten, and many of these show a very young princess. Could this be the local artist's attempt for the short-lived princess Setabenra, a final recognition in mourning? We may never know, as so many of these pieces were damaged when the city was abandoned and remain unidentifiable. When we look at the busts and art from Amarna, we of course notice how strangely these people are depicted. That was Akhenaten's own art style, but let us look beyond that and look at the faces of these young princesses. Though we may not know who is being depicted all the time, let us remember the human side of these young women. Nefertiti is remembered through the image of her beauty, but like so many who wish to be remembered through their children, the outcome would have been the latter, for one of the most mysterious and memorable queens to have ever walked on the sands of Egypt.
After seeing the Amarna heads close up for myself, I feel like I've discovered Nefertiti's family. We might not know a lot about them, and there might still be so much mystery, but to me, I hope that I've brought them back to life for you.
She is a truly enigmatic figure from the ancient world. Some view her as a trailblazer, others as a traitor to her religion. A woman who is increasingly identified by scholars as a pharaoh in her own right. Married to religious zealot and stepmother to Egypt's most famous pharaoh. She is the iconic Nefertiti. The material and textual evidence relating to her life has been the subject of study for more than 150 years, and yet the truth surrounding Nefertiti remains one of ancient Egypt's great mysteries. Unlike many rulers of the New Kingdom, such as Seti I and Ramses II, whose expertly mummified remains allow us to learn about their lives and their deaths, Nefertiti's mummy has eluded Egyptologists. Many theories exist regarding her ultimate fate, while numerous conspiracy theories swirl online. But which should we believe, and which are even plausible? Now filmmaker and Egyptologist Curtis Ryan Woodside has teamed up with many of the leading experts in his search for Nefertiti, in order to determine whether her mummy has already been found, or whether her body has even survived the past 3.5 millennia.
We want to encourage the real Queen Nefertiti to stand up.
Mummy 21B is actually a strong contender for Nefertiti.
There have been lots of attempts to try and deny that Nefertiti could be the mother of Tutankhamun.
Well, if we have a mummy, what can we actually learn from it?
And it's likely that the mummies of thousands of royal figures were lost to history.
Where is Nefertiti? It is a question on the lips of many Egyptologists. Has the mummy of Nefertiti already been found? The lead contender for this identification has, for many years, been a mummy found in an 18th dynasty tomb in the Valley of the Kings, known to archaeologists as KV55. This mysterious mummy was not the tomb's original owner. Rather, she was most likely placed there some years after her original burial in order to protect her from looting. This mummy was found in a side chamber of the tomb, alongside an older woman and a young man. The older lady has been identified through DNA testing of a lock of hair from Tutankhamun's tomb. She is Queen T, the grandmother of Tutankhamun and the mother of Nefertiti's husband, Akhenaten.
We found that the mummy known as Elder Lady, this mummy, people said she could be Queen T because there is a hair found in the tomb of King Tut in a box. They took the sample of this hair and they analyzed that with the hair of this lady and they said they're matching. But also this one will never confirm that this could be Queen T. But with Yuya and Tuya, DNA and T were able to find out that she is the daughter. This elder lady, she's the daughter of Yuya and Tuya, and the wife of Amenhotep III.
The identification of Queen T amongst this cache of 3 mummies has led many scholars to suspect that the other 2 mummies were members of her close family. In consequence, the mummy of the younger lady has been thought to be the elusive Nefertiti. Whilst the reburial of Nefertiti with family members would make sense, DNA samples taken from the younger lady would appear to prove otherwise. Professor Aidan Dodson of Bristol University has studied the younger lady in some detail whilst writing his book, Nefertiti, Queen and Pharaoh, published in 2020. He has his own thoughts on who this woman may be.
One of the key questions, of course, about Nefertiti is what happened to her mummy. And this is very much tied in with the question about the identity of a mummy found in 1898 in the tomb of Amenhotep II, known generally as the younger woman or the younger lady. However, when a number of mummies were DNA tested and the results published in 2010, all this rather changed. The results as published said that the younger lady was not only the mother of Tutankhamun, but was his mother by a brother-sister marriage. Now, this presents a number of problems because neither of the known wives of Akhenaten, Nefertiti and Kia, are royal sisters, and if they were, that would certainly be included in their titulary. And also that there is no sister of Akhenaten recorded as his wife at the time when you'd expect to find Tutankhamun being born. And there are also other sources at Amarna where if there were a third queen, you would actually expect to find some kind of mention. The same DNA signature in Tutankhamun, which would appear to come from a brother-sister marriage of his parents, is also to be found if you have 3 generations of first cousin marriages involved. But amongst the suggestions has been that Nefertiti was the daughter of Ai, and that Ai was a son of Yuya, and therefore a brother of Queen T. Also, going back a couple of generations, there are other suggestions which would fit in again with first cousin marriages. The only thing to make this work genealogically for the younger lady to be Nefertiti and also the mother of Tutankhamun is for her mother to have been a sister of Amenhotep III. Now, there is no trace of a wife of Ai with that background. So on that basis, one can produce a credible family tree, which would make the younger woman first cousin, result of a series of first cousin marriages of Akhenaten, and most likely, I think, Nefertiti. And there have been lots of attempts to try and deny that Nefertiti could be the mother of Tutankhamun. That's only on the basis that she's only ever shown with daughters. But that ignores the history of Egypt up until that point, where kings and queens are only ever shown with daughters. Sons are never shown as part of a family group. So to ask for Tutankhamun to appear in these procession of daughters you find on so many of Akhenaten's monuments is really to ask for something which shouldn't actually exist up until that point in Egyptian history. It's only under the Ramessides that you find mass representations of royal sons and daughters. So on that basis, I think a reasonable case can be made for the younger lady being Nefertiti and simultaneously Tutankhamun's mother. The age of the body has been estimated at between 25 and 35. Aging of ancient bodies of that kind of age is notoriously problematic. But between 25 and 35 actually works quite nicely for Nefertiti, because she presumably will have married Akhenaten when she was in early to mid-teens, say 15. And then she has a career of the 17 years of her husband's reign, plus at least 3 years following on from that as female king Neferuaten. One thing the identification of this mummy with Nefertiti does, however, says something about the way her life ended, because the body has very, very serious facial wounds, thought to be caused by tomb robbers who hacked through wrappings to get at the valuables. But when the body was CAT scanned a few years ago, the analysis showed that there were fragments in the sinuses which wouldn't have been there if the body had been a dried husk when it was damaged. That could only have got there if the body had been alive at the moment the wound was inflicted. That wound is so severe that it certainly would have caused massive hemorrhaging and probably death through blood loss or shock very, very rapidly. All of which would suggest that if this is a correct identification of it, and even if it isn't Nefertiti, it's still the mother of Tutankhamun, that she died a horrible death, whether by accident, design, or disguised design as an accident. So therefore, this body is a fascinating one and throws up all sorts of interesting questions. But I think one can make a good case for it to be Nefertiti, although there is absolutely no sort of smoking gun, and one can't say QED at this point in time.
With scholars divided over the identity of the younger lady, where does this leave the search for Nefertiti? There have been other candidates over the years, yet the majority have been eliminated as dating from the wrong dynasty, or indeed due to the mummification processes employed, not even hailing from senior nobility. This leaves just one remaining candidate from among the two otherwise unidentified female mummies discovered in an unfinished and undecorated tomb in the Valley of the Kings.
I have my own thoughts on who the mummy of Nefertiti could be. The two female mummies in KV21 have not actually received much attention. However, in recent years, Egyptologists have started to take a closer look at these two mystery women. Sophia Aziz, an Egyptologist and mummy expert, has been investigating KV21 with some interesting results.
The KV21 mummies sadly have been through a really rough ordeal. It's remarkable that they've survived at all. The tomb itself was first discovered in 1817 by an extraordinary character of Egyptology. His name was Giovanni Belzoni, an Italian man of great stature, strength, and intelligence. He was known as an adventurer, an explorer, and to some the father of modern Egyptology. He had an interest in hydraulics and even thought about becoming a monk, but he somehow ended up in Egypt discovering temples and tombs while getting involved in fistfights, dodging bullies, and competing with rivals. And when Belzoni discovered the tomb, it was in reasonably good condition, as were the two mummies within the tomb. He even describes their hair as long and well preserved. This, however, all changed when the tomb was rediscovered in 1989. By this time, it was evident that the tomb had been flooded for a considerable length of time, so both the mummies would have been submerged in this water. Additionally, some graffiti was discovered, indicating that visitors had been in and out of the tomb. In fact, even the mummy's hair was now missing, probably taken as a souvenir. Now, it's quite incredible that the two mummies were still within the tomb, and this could be because the tomb was undecorated, it was uninscribed, and there weren't any clues really to the identities of these two mummies. So this could be the reason why they were just left there, which is actually quite sad, the way they were sort of discovered, discarded, forgotten about, and then rediscovered. Now known as Mummy 21A and 21B, CT analysis was conducted, and the CT results are interesting. So by now, Mummy 21A had actually lost her head, and her body was in pieces. She had post-mortem fractures with some body parts missing. She was the younger of the two. Mummy 21B was determined to be in her 40s. Although she did have her head intact, her right eye was missing, her nose was missing, but it was determined to have been small and narrow. It also looked like her brain had not been extracted through the usual nasal route, and her heart was no longer in her body, but she did have resin-soaked pads within her body cavity. She also displayed signs of osteoarthritis, which would be indicative of a woman in her 40s. So, it was difficult to really identify the mummies with the state of preservation. But looking at the age difference between them, Mummy 21A being in her 20s, the other one being in her 40s, it's quite possible they were mother and daughter, and this would This would reflect the fact that they were interred together as well. And what's also interesting is that they had bent elbows and clenched fists, which would indicate that they were both royal mummies. Between 2007 and 2009, molecular analysis was conducted of a number of mummies from the New Kingdom period. This was to see if they were related. Now, amongst these mummies was the famous Tutankhamun, the two fetuses discovered in his tomb, and mummies 21A and 21B. The technique used by the team was genetic fingerprinting, which looks at short tandem repeats. These are repeated sequences found within the non-coding region of DNA. So these repeats vary between individuals. So by comparing the repeats across a number of microsatellites, it's possible to work out whether or not people are related. Genetic fingerprinting is used in paternity, maternity tests, genetic disorder testing, identifying unknown human remains, and in crime scenes. So if you've ever watched a crime scene investigation series, you'll know that at the crime scene, forensic evidence is gathered. If DNA is successfully extracted, hopefully to find a match. The problem with ancient DNA is that it tends to be heavily degraded. And this is due to processes such as autolysis after death, when the body's own enzymes start to self-destruct. And also the burial environment can also have an impact. Chemical, physical processes can further degrade the DNA, and of course microbial attack. So all of these factors can really have an impact on the DNA. When the study was conducted and the results released, this really left the academic field divided, with those that thought it was possible to extract ancient DNA and those argued that it's virtually impossible. So the reason for this was that at that time, extracting ancient DNA was still relatively new, and there'd been some studies in which it was claimed they had successfully extracted DNA only to find out it was due to modern contamination.
Yep. Can you pivot around here? Yeah, on the back one. Should be one underneath. Right, so we can now do some pictures of her head. Carefully.
The team, however, said that they took precautions. So they extracted the ancient DNA from deep within the bones, thereby trying to rule out contamination. Also, they had genotyped all the team that were involved in the study to rule out contamination. It was argued that it would have been more suitable to extract mitochondrial DNA. And this is because mitochondrial DNA, which is passed from the mother, is just better preserved than nuclear DNA. However, the team did eventually publish their mitochondrial results as well. But if we look at the data, so mummies 21A and 21B, we know that it's most likely the DNA would have been heavily degraded. If we think about the environment that they were in, being submerged in water, they were handled a lot, visitors were in and out of the tomb. So we'd expect the data not to really reveal a lot. And this was actually the case. The team were unable to retrieve sufficient data. So this does actually reflect the fact that the DNA would have been damaged. The only way to reconcile the differences is probably to do next generation sequencing, which is a more sensitive, high throughput technique, which is much more suitable for heavily degraded DNA. Now, if we look at the context of the burial itself, if we look at the location of the tomb and we look at the fact that both these ladies were interred together, they both had these clenched fists and bent elbows, it's quite likely that they were mother and daughter, and they would have been royal. So if we look at Mummy 21B, she's in her 40s. She has that degenerative condition. And if we look at Nefertiti's portrayal in her latter life, she is depicted as an older lady. So Mummy 21B is actually a strong contender for Nefertiti.
For me, the mummy KV21B is the strongest candidate for Nefertiti. If the DNA is anything to go by, it could be her. Even the mummy KV21A has been found to be the daughter of KV21B. Now, this could be huge, as we do not actually have a DNA source for Nefertiti. The headless KV21A has been linked by DNA results to the two stillborn children found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. That could only mean one thing, that the headless mummy KV21A is in fact the sister and wife and the mother of the two children of Tutankhamun. This mummy KV21A, that I believe is Tut's sister Ankhesenamun, even shares some similarities with the body of Tut, including some of the genetic bodily deformations. If she is Ankhesenamun, that makes KV21B her mother, and we know that the mother of Ankhesenamun was none other than Nefertiti. Therefore, 21B could in fact be Nefertiti. The reason that we don't have a DNA profile for Nefertiti is because we're not actually sure who her parents are. She has been linked to be the daughter of Pharaoh I. Now you see, Tuya and Yuya had 3 children. They were Queen T, the royal astronomer Anan, and I. In Amarna, I has been referred to as the god's father. This would indicate that he is the father of a daughter that has married the pharaoh, which would be Nefertiti. So this title links I to be the father of Nefertiti quite nicely. In my opinion, it is entirely possible that KV21B is Nefertiti. If you just look at the face of the mummy, and you look at the representations that we have of Nefertiti, the similarities are striking. Now, I am not in any way a forensic pathologist or an expert at facial reconstruction. However, I have my own way of doing an artistic representation, an artistic reconstruction of a mummy. When you look at KV21B, you first of all notice the long, slender neck and, of course, the strong jawline. However, you also start to notice the eyes. She has painted on eyeliner on the mummy in the thin style, which we can only associate with the bust of Nefertiti. Because KV21B's head has been damaged in later years by grave robbers, one of her eyes is actually missing. So what I did in my reconstruction process was I took the one eye on the one side, duplicated that, inverted it and lined it up to the skull. That way I could have a symmetric face to work with. Then what I start to do, I start to outline key features on the mummy. And what I started to notice was this mummy shared a lot of the lines on the face that we would associate with Nefertiti, such as the jowls by the mouth. Also, the lines under the eyes are strikingly similar to the Nefertiti Berlin bust. Even the cheekbones and jawline lines up pretty well. Even the nose, eye shape and the lips line up pretty well with representations that we have of Nefertiti. I am in no way claiming that KV21b is 100% Nefertiti. However, for me, she is the closest contender. Have a look at the reconstruction that I have done and make up your own mind. This leaves us in a predicament because you see many Egyptologists are skeptical on the DNA results of KV21A and B. Some Egyptologists are still searching for the real Nefertiti.
Today, we want to encourage the real Queen Nefertiti to stand up. We have to remember this is not a photographic likeness of the Queen. There was no such thing as portraiture in the Western sense in ancient Egypt. The torso in the Brooklyn Museum of Akhenaten, and you can notice that the cartouches are all hacked out. That's because the ancient Egyptians did everything they could to try to erase his memory. Because the ancient Egyptians purposefully tried to destroy the memory of the Amarna period, it is important for us Egyptologists to try to enlist the service of other individuals to help us to try to reconstruct that period. And one of the ways we can do this is by asking individuals that are involved in medicine and genealogical research to come to our assistance and collaborate with us. Science in the service of the humanities is a very, very valuable tool. And then trying to identify Nefertiti and other members of the ancient Amarna family, the two mummies that are suggested to be the physical remains of Queen Nefertiti. The first, KV55YL. Another set of human remains that are suggested to represent Nefertiti were KV21B. So now, as is typical in ancient Egyptian studies, we have a clash of titans, two camps. Are the physical remains in KV35, younger lady, the remains of Nefertiti? Or are the physical remains of KV21B the physical remains of Nefertiti? And we know that she was not a twin. So one of these two identifications has to be dismissed. And here, in a nutshell, is how we unpackage the two theories so that you can make an educated conclusion about which of the identifications is the more compelling. And again, in 2019, the genetic markers of this mummy, KV55 younger woman, were compared, very compelling evidence that she is in fact able to be connected with that royal family. Now, as we look at KV21B, there were analyses that were conducted on this mummy in 2016 and 2021, but those genetic markers seem to be less numerous, and there are many, many more gaps in her genetic markers. By the fact that the DNA evidence did not support the identification of KV21B as Nefertiti, the proponents of that theory decided they would take another tack. And so they tried to press into service the use of a CAT scan and art historical data. And what they tried to do was to show that there was coincidence between the mummy and the cranium as revealed by a CAT scan. And so the method just described is academically flawed. So the two images that they chose represent an individual at two different stages in their life. And so it's inconceivable that a mummy can represent the two ends of a person's life, a younger and an older one. So, in my opinion, the superimposition of the mummy and the cranium as a result of a CAT scan on two different images that do not necessarily represent the same face is open to serious academic scrutiny. Or will you base your conclusion on the preponderance of evidence that scientific genealogical data provides? The answer is up to you.
Hi, Kara.
Hi, Curtis. How are you?
I'm great, and you?
Good. Hanging in there.
Yeah. I'm working on this new documentary, and I was discussing it with you beforehand, and you had some pretty interesting views about it, and I just thought it would be great to have you share your views in this documentary. So we're looking to see who are the candidates for Nefertiti's mummy. What is your opinion, or do you think she should still be a mystery?
It's funny, there's all of this hemming and hawing and discussion about which mummy is hers, and some have identified her based on hair, some have identified her based on DNA studies, some have identified her based on location. And I actually just steer clear of the argument almost entirely. Just standing on the sidelines with arms crossed and scowling from afar, asking, well, if we have a mummy, what can we actually learn from it? Sometimes you can learn a great deal, sometimes not as much as you would like. Finding the mummy of Nefertiti, what could it potentially teach us? Could it potentially sideline us into imposing certain theories or questions upon her? Yeah. And I think that just the mummy of Hatshepsut, and how much attention finding the mummy of Hatshepsut seems to have drawn from scholarship has, in my opinion, taken away from Hatshepsut's history, achievements, and many other issues that I think deserve more attention. So in some ways, I think the mummy chase is like the shiny thing over here, and I would rather be over here with my arms crossed, scowling, looking on outside.
You want to learn more about what she did and who she was, rather than, okay, there's the 3,000-year-old body. Right.
I say this to my graduate students all the time. I say it to my undergraduate students all the time. We should only be asking research questions that we have a chance of answering. And in the case of some mummies, unless there is a toe tag, unless there is a text assigned to this mummy, we will never truly know whose mummy is Nefertiti's. It's the same with Akhenaten. If these mummies aren't marked in some way that's definitive, there will always be some element of doubt, and we will always be unsure about which mummy is whose. And so, given that this is a research question that we actually cannot answer, in the same way that I have students that want to write about Akhenaten, was he mad or strategic? Well, that's great. You can touch that question, but you'll never be able to get to Akhenaten's psychological state because the Egyptians didn't leave anything about Akhenaten's psychological state. In the same way, if this mummy is not definitively marked, we can't know. And Nefertiti, not being ostensibly a member of the 18th dynasty royal household, at least directly related, DNA studies are only going to be of so much use. And this is a circular argument of tail chasing that I would rather opt out of. If a woman's mummy is found whose DNA is linked to Tutankhamun, then why could it not be one of his sisters or somebody else in the family whom we don't know? Our attempts to find her may impose identities on mummies that are not her.
It's not like the mummy of, let's say, Seti I or Ramses II, where we had their names on the bandages on the inside. Yeah. This is basically all guesswork.
Well, the other thing floating about this research, Curtis, if I may be so bold, is Nicholas Reeves' suggestion that Tutankhamun was buried in the foyer of the king who served before him. And the king who served before him was likely Smenkhare. Smenkhare's funerary materials have not been found in any way, shape, or form from the Valley of the Kings, which is highly unusual and suggests that there is a tomb for Smenkhare that we maybe have not discovered yet, right?
Yeah.
And if you fit with, I would say, 30 to 40% of Egyptologists who are open to the idea that Nefertiti, because she shares the Ankhesenamun name and no other king is taking on the throne name of another king, that would be a strange and aberrant thing to do. That Ankhesenamun element does link Nefertiti, whom we know is Nefertiti, with Smenkhare. If Nefertiti is Smenkhare, then we can be talking about this mummy identification all the time, but she may be hidden away someplace where we have not discovered her yet. That theory of Nick Reeves haunts this entire discussion, and it is a typical ploy of researchers to say, but that tomb isn't here, we don't have it.
My close examination of these scans highlighted the apparent presence of closed doorways. On the west wall, potentially leading to an additional Tutankhamun period storeroom, labelled X in the cutaway bottom left here. And that on the north to a corridor continuation of the tomb, labelled Y. The proposal I put forward was that the burial of Tutankhamun was actually a tomb within a tomb.
And the fact that we cannot find her is as much of interest to me in what the Egyptians chose to remember about female power in particular. That's where I would rather spend my time. I also see this certainty that's imposed, generally swirling about documentaries for television research, which I put research in scare quotes for that, and an ego-driven attempt to connect a find, a discovery to a particular mummy or body, and to create an arena of attention that draws the gaze to Egypt and to that particular discoverer. So to be honest, I don't trust a lot of this discussion that's happening.
Yeah. That's why I wanted to have this discussion with you, because when I make documentaries, I want to keep it open. I want to have different opinions. I want to have the facts.
As Kara mentioned, Nicholas Reeves has his own theory that Nefertiti is still yet to be discovered in an undiscovered chamber in Tutankhamun's tomb. Now, this is a very controversial issue amongst many. However, until we know 100% for sure, that too remains a mystery. It is possible that her mummy has been found already and is lying in a museum basement, uncatalogued. It could even be that she is in a private collection, or worst of all, she was maybe sold to a Victorian tourist and has since then been totally destroyed, as was fashionable at the time.
Mummies have long been a source of fascination in the Western world, but what they used to be was kind of a commodity. It's long been believed that mummified bodies had magical properties. It was as if all the speculation regarding the mysticism and magic of the ancient pharaohs had literally become embodied in the remains of the Egyptians themselves. So mummies were used for esoteric and occult ingredients, love potions, health tinctures, that kind of thing. It was believed they had medicinal properties. They were even ground up and used in popular paint that was known as mummy brown. To think of this today is pretty shocking. I mean, the Victorians were consuming mummies, literally in a cannibalistic way. There's a level of dehumanisation and disregard for human remains that finds its pinnacle in the famous mummy unwrapping parties. By the late 17th century, the physical consumption of mummies was falling out of favour, but the cultural consumption was only becoming more popular. One of the first recorded public unwrappings of a mummy is from the early 18th century. It was undertaken by an apothecary known as Christian Herzog, and he later published his findings. This was a new approach lent credence under the banner of scientific discovery. The spectacle began to overwhelm the research as the 19th century took hold. Famously, it was an Englishman named Thomas Pettigrew, later known as Mummy Pettigrew, who popularised the mummy unwrapping party concept. Pettigrew became interested in the subject after assisting famous explorer Giovanni Belzoni in an early unwrapping party held for physicians. The popularity of mummy unwrapping parties swelled in the 1830s. Early Victorian audiences found the mixture of spectacle, death, and scientific research to be an irresistible cocktail. The last mummy unwrapping occurred in 1908 by Margaret Murray. That's just over a century of the public ruin of Egyptian bodies. Countless mummies were destroyed and lost to these centuries of Western consumption of Egyptian remains, and it's likely that the mummies of thousands of royal figures were lost to history. Given that we've never been able to positively identify the mummy of Nefertiti, it's entirely possible, maybe even likely, that her remains were discovered, uncategorized, and lost in this manner.
I've been given permission to open the tomb of I myself with the key.
Imagine the method of like light with just a little lamp.
It could be that her mummy is still lying inside her tomb, which is yet to be discovered. If Pharaoh I really is her father, it is possible that Nefertiti was buried in the Western Valley in Luxor, near her father I and her father-in-law Amenhotep III's tombs.
Whilst it's entirely possible that Nefertiti's tomb, and indeed mummy, may still lie undiscovered beneath the sands of Egypt, it is equally possible that Nefertiti may remain like so many aspects of ancient Egyptian culture and history, a tantalizing enigma for eternity.
Excuse how disheveled I look, I'm getting a bit hot right now. But on our way past, I thought I would stop and tell you about these two humongous statues. This is for Amenhotep III, the father of Akhenaten. Let's go take a look closer. The Greeks used to refer to these statues as the Colossi of Memnon. Next to King Amenhotep III, at the entrance to his mortuary temple, we have his queen, Queen T. And Queen T was known as one of the strongest queens from ancient Egypt. She's shown as very angry sometimes, but she was very powerful. She made a lot of decisions for the country, and she really did a lot of good. And when Akhenaten changed the religion, she only went to Amarna to visit him once, and she remained living here in Thebes, modern-day Luxor. In KV55, 3 mummies turned out to be from the Amarna period. And actually, after a couple of tests and identification, the mummy of Queen T. Now, to me, Queen T looks like she would have been incredibly beautiful, with a long neck, beautiful shoulders, and actually look at her face. She looks very serene, very calm, and even her hair, I can imagine how this woman's hair would have looked. Look how beautiful and long and thick her hair was. And she would have been quite old when she died, so she looked pretty good. Here's another image of the great Queen T. We see her hair here very well. She's had a bit of damage on her chest. When tomb robbers broke into the tomb, they damaged the body of Queen T along with the other Amarna mummies in the Valley of the Kings. This is a color image of Queen T's mummy, and we can see that her hair has actually got a little bit of a red color to it. So she probably was brunette or even a redhead. You see her royal hand up, which shows that she was a queen. The very distasteful damage that they've done to this queen's body. There is only one time written down that shows Queen T actually visiting her son Akhenaten in Amarna. I'm of the opinion that Queen T was not a strong supporter of this new religion, even though we have a few artifacts showing Queen T worshipping Aten. This might have just been Akhenaten forcing these art pieces to be created for his mother. I'm of the opinion that Queen T stayed in Thebes, only visiting her son once for his Jubilee celebration, and she continued to worship Amun in Thebes. That is why she decided not to move to Amarna, where she would not be controlled religiously. Come with me and see a very beautiful and fascinating tomb in the Valley of the Nobles. This is the tomb, a very special tomb, of Ramosa. And Ramosa was the vizier to Amenhotep III and Amenhotep IV, who later changed his name to Akhenaten. And what is very special about this tomb is very few color, everything is black and white. The art is very different because of the Aten religion that Amenhotep IV brought in. And something else you notice, there are these enormous columns inside this tomb, which is very unique. And standing in here, you hear the echoes. It is very overpowering to be in here right now. And something that I want to show everyone. The Egyptians believed in, obviously, reincarnation, and I believe that I am inside this tomb. Here is a man, long hair, a beard, eyeliner, and a bit of a big nose. Quite similar to me, won't you say? So, yeah, it's almost like I'm looking at my Egyptian self here. What is happening here is the vizier Ramosa is greeting and receiving tributes and gifts as well as taxes from the Egyptians, allies, and neighboring countries. The Egyptians invented taxes, and everyone who was connected to them was compelled to pay taxes to the priests as well as to the pharaoh. Taxes were taken in various forms, however the most common form was grain. Being the vizier, Ramosa was in charge of many duties, not only taxes. Along here, we see Ramosa and his wife, and he's seen here getting prepared, giving the offerings for his preparation to enter the afterlife. And it is so beautiful to see. Everything is just stone, and the eyes and the eyebrows have been made black, very symbolic of the Egyptians wearing their makeup. As we know, the Egyptians invented makeup, and this is a clear sign of the eyeliner that was very special to them. As you move on, you see them sitting here, preparing to go to the funeral. Here's the funeral happening. This is the only color. This is the only wall that was made during the time of Amun, before Aten. And here's the color happening. The official mourners were throwing sand over their heads, and the eyeliner that's running from the woman crying. And they would do this for 70 days until the mummy was put into the tomb. Ramosa's funeral would have been very extravagant, and like the pharaohs, he was also buried in a golden shrine. And in his tomb, he was placed with all the objects that he would need in his afterlife: beds, clothes, various food items. These columns were carved out of the stone that the tomb was carved into. And a very special thing, when you come over here, you will see where the religion suddenly changes from Amun to Aten, changed by Akhenaten. And here we see the very prominent image of the sun god Aten. And here is Nefertiti and Akhenaten inside this tomb, being bathed by the sun rays. I can only imagine what it sounded like, what they would have said during this burial. And something interesting is Ramosa disappeared from history, and Pharaoh later on took over, the father of Nefertiti and the vizier to Akhenaten and Tutankhamun. It's very moving to think about what this man had to go through, sacrificing his religion for Aten and Akhenaten. It is very rare that we see an image or a depiction of Akhenaten with his father Amenhotep III. You could even see Amenhotep IV as almost the outcast of the family. So this could be one of the reasons why he changed the religion from worshipping Amun to his one god, Aten. He moved the capital city from Thebes into the middle of the desert to Amarna. And at Amarna, it's been destroyed since Akhenaten was there. But it's a very difficult time period because we're not quite sure of what happened. There's so many theories. One of the theories being that maybe even Nefertiti was co-regent with Akhenaten, or that Nefertiti outlived Akhenaten, but we cannot be sure. I am of the opinion that Nefertiti actually died before Akhenaten of plague, but we can't be 100% sure unless we invent a time machine to take us all back there. Akhenaten stated on a stela outside the boundaries of Amarna that he would never leave his city, and he never did. He didn't even answer when a foreign country would send him a letter asking for help. This was very bad. It put Egypt into such a bad light.
These blocks that we're seeing here were originally at Karnak Temple, and after Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, Horemheb I, every successor after him took these blocks down, flipped them over, and reused these as rubble to fill in other buildings. And maybe a good thing, because it's preserved all of these rituals of Akhenaten worshipping Aten, and we see just exactly what this king was thinking for his religion.
He changed the religion, which was quite strange. Anybody who was caught worshipping Amun or any other Egyptian god was either forced to convert or killed. In some cases, we actually see that Nefertiti was even stronger than Akhenaten, because we see Nefertiti smiting these so-called enemies who are actually Egyptians worshipping the wrong god. You kind of get an idea of the relationship between Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Nefertiti being this incredibly powerful woman, Akhenaten being a more weak man. You can tell this because of his statues. He looks very different. He's malformed. He's got what people speculate as epilepsy, which is why he was having these visions. So, you know, with Akhenaten, things are so all over the place, it's very difficult to pinpoint down what was going through this guy's head.
Thank you.
During Akhenaten's reign, he took on a co-regent known as Smenkhara. This was towards the end. And actually, Smenkhara is believed to be a man. Some people believe maybe Smenkhara was Nefertiti. However, after Smenkhara, there was a short reign by another pharaoh known as Nefernuaten, and many people are of the opinion that Nefertiti changed herself into a pharaoh and used the throne name as Nefernuaten. I'm not of this opinion, just because I've seen a lot of studies done by other Egyptologists who also believe Nefertiti died during Akhenaten's reign, hence why Smenkhara came in. So, if Nefertiti was so strong in believing in Aten, why would Nefertiti become pharaoh and then help Tutankhamun to change the religion back to Amun? It just doesn't add up. But I respect other people's opinions, but this is just my opinion. I believe Nefertiti died during Akhenaten's reign. But, you know, we will never know 100% for sure. In the tomb of KV55 in Thebes, modern-day Luxor, where they found Queen T, we have two other Amarna period mummies. One which is a young prince. We presume he might even be Smenkhara. This lady over here, her face has been taken away basically by tomb robbers who realized who this woman was. They were not happy with the Amarna period family. This is why these mummies have all been damaged so much. They were moved into the valley, the tombs got broken into, and the tomb raiders were not pleased. Her face that has been bludgeoned in, her chest they've taken away her breasts, they've taken away her arms, which would have been bent to show that she is a queen. Many Egyptologists have theorized that this might even be Queen Nefertiti. She's even got here the two pierced ears, and we know that Nefertiti was shown always with two pierced ears. Even on her bust she had two pierced ears. But DNA tests show that this mummy was actually Kia, the mother of King Tut. We know that Kia was the mother of Tut. The most controversial tomb and excavation was for KV55, done by Theodore Davies. They went into this tomb, and to get through the main door, the sealed door, they actually used dynamite, and this damaged a lot of the artifacts in the tomb. And inside this tomb, they found this coffin. You can see the rubble, everything around it, and this coffin, which was so badly damaged because of the explosion to get into this tomb. Actually, we know that this coffin was for Akhenaten. His name was taken off, however, underneath it says son of Aten, which is Akhenaten. But actually, the craziest thing is when you look at the face of the coffin, it's still there. In modern time now, the face is not there anymore. A possible theory is Theodore Davies took the face off. He broke the face off and sold it to help pay for his excavations in the Valley of the Kings. In 1912, a German excavation crew were in Amarna. This is where they found one of the most famous images of Nefertiti. This is the first ever image taken of the bust of Queen Nefertiti. This is the first official image, the first official photo taken of the bust of Nefertiti. Hitler was a big fan of Nefertiti, and when in World War II, Egypt asked for this bust to be returned to the Egyptian Museum, Hitler threatened Egypt by saying that he's going to blow up major monuments. That is how this woman has remained in Germany. Nefertiti is clearly very beautiful. However, I see her as maybe a little bit cold, not really interested in other people's ideas or opinions. She was very opinionated. That's the idea I get about her. And with the connection with Tut's mother Kia, and her maybe being behind Kia's disappearance, there is something more mysterious behind this face. It is a known fact that Nefertiti gave birth to 6 daughters, and that's the truth, only daughters, not a son. It is the minor wife of Akhenaten, Kia, who gave birth to the future pharaoh, Tutankhamun, who was known then as Tutankhaten. Canopic jars here for Tut's mother, Kia, the other wife of Akhenaten, the one that Nefertiti became jealous of, and she disappeared from history. We're not sure why. Maybe Nefertiti had something to do with it. Inside this sarcophagus, they found a lock of Tut's grandmother's hair for Queen T. So she was a very powerful woman, so I'm sure he had a very strong bond with his grandmother. There's a lot of speculation about Queen T. One of the theories that I like to believe is that maybe, possibly, Queen T outlived her son Akhenaten just for a couple of years. And Queen T, along with her brother Ai, were very instrumental in changing the religion back from Aten to Amun and shaping Tutankhamun into the pharaoh that he became for the 9 or 10 years that he actually ruled for. This would explain a lot about why Queen T only visited Amarna once. But if this did happen, this means that Queen T would have had to be somewhere between 90 and 100 years old when Tut became pharaoh, which seems very unlikely, but not entirely impossible. This is one of Howard Carter's notes. This is actually the inside of a small coffin given to Tut by his grandmother, Queen T. But what I love the most, it mentions Queen T's name many times here, but here it says, a gift for Tutankhamun from Queen T, a gift of grace. I love that, because this tells me Queen T may have possibly been alive in the early years of Tut's reign, because Tut, when Queen T knew him, would have been referred to as Tutankhaten, not Tutankhamun. Tut had an incredible sense of style. He was very stylish for his time. His perfume was custom made with spicard plants from India and mixed with frankincense. He had a very unique scent. He also loved his clothing, and he had a mannequin of himself. His staff would come in the morning, dress the mannequin, and he would choose, okay, this outfit is okay, I don't like it with these pants, whatever. Very interesting how interested he was in appearance. This is Tut's throne, the main throne that he would use in his everyday life. And actually this throne was originally used by his father, Akhenaten. It's obvious because you can see there the Aten sun rays that are coming down. You can see Ankhesenamun, Tut's sister, affectionately holding him as her husband. Tut's name is written as Tutankhaten on the armrest, which is guarded by the vulture and the cobra. But all is not as it seems on this throne, as Tut and Ankhesenamun have replaced the original depictions which were of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. To the front of Ankhesenamun we can see the outline of what is surely Nefertiti's face. The god Horus was obviously trying to avenge his father's death, Osiris, by fighting with Set, and they had a battle at Edfu, which is why they built Edfu Temple. And this here is not actually showing Tut hunting on a boat. It is symbolic because during this battle between Horus and Set, Set turned into a hippo. Horus took a harpoon and killed Set as a hippo. This is actually showing that Tut is overcoming the chaos in Egypt at that time. And here is Tutankhamun's burial chamber. It's very small. As we know, the tomb was actually swapped by Pharaoh I for Tut. And it's actually a very beautiful tomb. And here we have the stone sarcophagus with the golden sarcophagus on the inside. And on the walls here, you can see, here's the shrine with the Tut's mummy on the inside, and over there we see Tut in the form of Osiris in his white cloak. Also Pharaoh I, who is Nefertiti's father actually, performing the opening of the mouth ceremony, which allows the dead to revive their senses. Let's go inside into the burial chamber. Here we have the stone sarcophagus with the 4 protective goddesses on either side. And here we have Tut being greeted by Anubis, who is leading him on his journey in the afterlife. And down here we have the 12 baboons, the 12 baboons of Thoth, showing the 12 hours of the night and of the day. Here we see Tutankhamun with the deities, and Tut here with Osiris mummified. As we go down, we see Tut here with Eye, and they're performing the opening of the mouth ceremony. And it's just incredible to be seeing this so up close.
And as you'll notice, there's a lot of like speckles on the walls, almost like mold, that has actually been proven that it's not growing, that it was formed when they closed the tomb because the paint was not dry when they sealed this tomb. And when you're standing here, you hear the echoes. You can imagine what it would have been like at the funeral. But the thing you get a sense of is, why is it so small? But still you'll notice the similarities between Tut's tomb and I's tomb. The art is very similar, the colors are very similar. As Howard Carter, I can just imagine what it would have been like to be inside Tut's tomb and to see just gold everywhere. After Tut died, Pharaoh I, he knew that the only way he could become Pharaoh is by marrying Ankhesenamun, Tut's wife, half-sister. Ankhesenamun did not want to marry this old man. He would have been 70-something at this stage. She even wrote to the land of Mitanni asking the king, please send me one of your sons, I will marry him. And Pharaoh I stopped the prince and killed him. Pharaoh I decided to go ahead and destroy the memory of Tutankhamun. He destroyed images and statues and any depiction of Tut. Even after I died, after his short 2-year reign, Horemheb, who was an army general, then went on to destroy images of Akhenaten, Tut, I, and basically removing the entire Amarna period from history. I have been inside many tombs, and each tomb gives me a different feeling, but Tut's tomb is entirely unique. I feel very uneasy, not only because Tut's body is still in the tomb, but because there is so much mystery around this young king. You'll hear the fans in here. That is to keep the humidity regulated. And what they actually do is when the humidity gets too high, they have a sensor and it actually makes an alarm and they close the tube because humidity can actually be very damaging to the artwork that you're looking at. As we leave the Valley of the Kings with the naturally formed pyramid, we go to an area under high security where very few people have ever been or even heard of before.
Welcome to Valley of Baboons, where we do have a very beautiful tomb. We're going to see the tomb of I.
Am I right in saying that I, when Tut died, he wanted to take the throne so quickly, he rushed the mummification process.
He did.
And he put Tut into a tomb that was not complete.
And even it was not for him at all.
Yes.
So we do believe the tomb for Tutankhamun, where it is right now at Valley of the Kings, should not be for him at all.
There's absolutely no tourists here. It's just us right now. It's very special.
No doubt. Come and visit Egypt.
I've been given permission to open the tomb of I myself with the key.
Imagine the method of like light
with just a little lamp.
That's right. This is the burial chamber, and this is the beautiful coffin, which is made like from one single piece of stone, red granite.
The paintings are very similar to the paintings inside Tutankhamun's tomb.
That's right. Even the baboons, and even whatever like and Valley of the Kings and the tomb of Tutankhamun is repeated once more here. Egypt is heaven and heaven is Egypt. Exactly. But you can notice that there's most of the cartouches, most of the names of I had been chiseled out. Why? And this is one of the main reasons, because lots of people discovered that his eye, he was not the right person to be on this tomb, as well as to be ruling Egypt for that moment.
Yes.
So
it should have been Horemheb.
That's right.
This tomb is like 3,000 years old.
That's right. That's right.
To be standing here looking at these things is incredible. This Sphinx is a white alabaster Sphinx of Tutankhamun, but obviously you can see his face has been very badly damaged. Obviously, from the people who took over after him who were still angry at Akhenaten. And here at the top, where the cobra would have been, they've taken the cobra away because the cobra was originally solid gold, so they've taken that away. The original images found from Tut's tomb that were taken by Howard Carter and Harry Burton. This was the innermost coffin, and underneath this, the death mask of Tutankhamun. And underneath this mask, they found the body of the pharaoh, the young pharaoh, the boy king, Tutankhamun. The mask was found with the beard was actually broken off. So this is how it would have looked without a beard. The beard being very symbolic of the pharaoh, if it had a curve on it, passing over to the afterlife, known as the Osiris beard. The side profile, you can see it's had a lot of damage from when Howard Carter pulled it off of the young king's body. He actually dislocated Tut's head when he took the mask off. A very unique thing is Tut is the only pharaoh shown here wearing a cobra and a vulture at the same time. Vultures were seen more as feminine, so we're not sure if maybe the headdress was gifted to Tut or recycled and the face was added on. It might just be the way that they manufactured the mask. But something that annoys me is people always say Tut's ears are pierced. Now, countless other pharaohs have also got pierced ears. Even later on in their adult life, they are shown with pierced ears. Seti, Ramses, Akhenaten are all shown as adults with pierced ears. So that theory we can just dismiss instantly. The beard was reattached many years later, and this necklace is actually underneath the mask on display at the moment. Up until the 1940s, Tut's mask was displayed in the Cairo Museum, as we see here, with the beard not attached. It's only recently that the beard has been attached in the late 40s. Recently, the beard has been broken off, stuck on. We all know this story. It was stuck on with epoxy superglue. But you know what? Even without a beard, this mask is so iconic. Death masks in ancient Egypt were incredibly important. Mostly because once you've been mummified, your face decays and your spirit cannot recognize your body. So they would place a mask over the mummified body for the spirit, once it travels back to your body after the 70 days, for it to recognize who you are, to be revived in the afterlife. And also the gods needed to recognize who this body was. And by putting a mask preserving the face perfectly, this allowed people to be recognized in the afterlife.
There were 3 bodies discovered in the tomb of Tutankhamun. I am making my way down to Mahdi, a district in Cairo, to meet with Dr. Sahar Salim, as we've been investigating 2 of these unique and mysterious mummies.
Hello. Hi. Hi, Sahar.
How are you?
Fine.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah, nice to
Please,
see you
nice to see
again.
again. Hello. Please come in.
Thank you. I can't wait to hear more about Tut's children.
Yes, let's do it.
Sahar, I believe you have something special that you want to show to me in connection with Tut's children.
Yes, true. And
Yeah.
this is a special gift for the anniversary of the discovery of King Tutankhamun.
Yeah, because I believe you've been, as we've been working on something very special together.
So I'm eager to show it to you.
In 1922, when the tomb of Tutankhamun was discovered, with over 5,000 artifacts inside, one raised more questions than answers for the Egyptologists. Way at the back of the tomb, in the so-called treasury room, guarded at the doorway by the elegant black jackal god Anubis, the god that was tasked with leading the dead through the challenges to ultimately meet with Osiris and enter the next life. Behind him, simply placed above some other treasures, was a plain, undecorated white box. But this box contained something that was more precious to the pharaoh than any piece of gold could be. There were two small sarcophagi, each containing two mummified babies. This myth that Tutankhamun was not a significant pharaoh is simply not true. His successors removed his name from history, but he ruled for 10 years, relocating the capital city back to Waset, Thebes, or Luxor, depending on which name you call it. He even reinstated Egypt's chief god, Amun. He did make significant changes, for the better, even if he was a puppet. It was done in his name. However, apart from being a pharaoh, who is shown in war and stately occasions, Tutankhamun was also a brother and furthermore a husband. He and his wife, Ankhesenamun, had a deep love, evident from the images we see of them together. These two siblings had only each other to lean on for emotional support. They even tried to continue their family line, resulting in the devastating outcome of two stillborn children. Tut died at the age of 19, his wife soon after, and thus their family was officially out of history. Yet, the discovery of his tomb made them the most celebrated king and queen from ancient Egypt. But what about these two children of Tut and Ankhesenamun? Dr. Sahar Salim has been studying them in depth with unprecedented techniques to discover their secrets. And using these new techniques, we can reveal the faces of Tutankhamun's children for the first time.
The two children of the mummified daughters Tutankhamun that were actually proved by the DNA to be his daughters,
yes,
they were stored in my university, in the Faculty of Medicine of Qasr Ain. They've been stored there since 1925.
Okay.
And it was the time in 2008, actually on the 28th of July in 2008, when we want to study the the two daughters of Tutankhamun as part of the Egyptian mummy project to link them to their daddy.
Because these are princesses.
Yeah, they are princesses. And from the initial examination that has been done in an autopsy by Professor Derry, who was also a colleague professor in the university, professor of anatomy, and he was the one that actually autopsied their father.
Why were you so passionate to scan these two children?
I'm so passionate because they were found in the tomb of King Tutankhamun. The two miniature mummies were found head to feet, placed inside a box, a totally non-decorated box. Two miniature bodies that were not known if they were related to Tutankhamun, or they were sort of a cult, or
like an offering,
or like an offering, or magic, or something. So it was not known. There were only these three human remains inside the tomb: the King Tutankhamun and these two miniature mummies that were not known what they were. It was the initial examination by Douglas Derry, 1932, that he said, okay, they were fetuses. So, okay, they were fetuses, but it was not known until the DNA was part of the Egyptian mummy project that proved the link of the two fetuses with King Tutankhamun. Now it's about time to examine them and to see who are they, and how they are not like any fetus. They were the royal fetuses. And there is something.
They're the children of the Pharaoh.
The children of the Pharaoh. There's also something that I was passionate, and I was just very worried, because this was actually the first ever CT scan of a mummified fetus.
Wow.
So
was there some challenges in that? Because
a lot of challenges. I don't have a road map. I was the one to create a map to how to examine and how to do the CT scan. What are the parameters for not only a fetus, but also a mummified fetus? And how to interpret, how to know if I can know the sex at what age, how to know the developing, and how to get the age, and what is the style of mummification? Was it different than the mummification that we know, a special type of mummification for the fetuses? I didn't know. I didn't know what to face.
Unprecedented.
So I started with the best quality CT scanning that I could for these miniature bodies, and going from there, I just went to the forensic studies. That what did they do for identifying dumb fetuses in the modern time? How they manage that and implement all this on the two fetuses, and adding the changes that would happen by the mummification.
So what did you find?
It's amazing to know the mummies that were once in a very perfect condition when they first autopsied in 1932 by Derry. And even Derry, he said that there was a tiny, smaller one and a little bit bigger one. And he said that even
baby A, baby B.
Even the eyelashes were there. The eyebrows were there.
Delicate.
The part of the umbilical cord was still attached to the tiny fetus. They were in a perfect condition. But probably the way that they were stored, maybe unnoticed, and considered as an ordinary, maybe a specimen of anatomy, they were not recognized as royal fetuses, children. So they did not have the proper storage that deteriorated them and caused them in the CT scan to show a lot of breakage of bones, broken bones in both fetuses. Maybe the smaller one, because this tiny one, it had now
more delicate,
and now had a lot of damage.
The storage of these babies has led to their mummies looking quite deteriorated. Did this prove difficult when you were scanning them to prove, well, what was done during storage and what was done actually during mummification?
Definitely, this was also another challenging point, that the preservation was not perfect. Using the two-dimensional images and three-dimensional imaging of the CT scan and manipulating the image in different directions with different window that you change the appearance of the image. This helped me to get the best information that I can get. So this was the preservation condition, which was not very good.
Great, yeah.
And then the second challenge was how to determine the sex of the mummies. So the autopsy of Derry, he mentioned that these were two female fetuses.
You had to prove it.
And at his time, he had the option or the privilege that the mummies were in just perfect condition, just unwrapped.
Yeah.
So he was a professor of anatomy, so he was knowledgeable about that. So I would take his assessment as right, as correct, and I have to check whether this also appears to me or not. But my question was the estimation of Derry, Douglas Derry, about the age was like 6 months and 8 months.
Premature.
Old. Yeah, premature. Inside the womb.
Yeah.
So this was before gestation or before being born. My question was: do we know the sex of the fetuses at that age to be able to say that this is a male or female? And the answer was yes. It was quite enough old in order to.
You could tell from your scans.
We can tell from that age and onwards.
Okay.
And the morphology of the external genitalia for the fetuses, it showed that they were female. So this was also it's a mummy. It's unlike the skeleton, which we depend on the shape of the bones, but when you have a mummified preserved tissue, this would be helpful. So the female organs, they
were intact.
They were intact. I have also a challenge for estimation of the gestational age, or at what time they died in the womb.
Because there's been no CT scans done before of fetuses.
Yeah, this was the first CT scan done for a mummified fetus, and I have to develop the guidelines, maybe for other mummified fetuses if they ever get CT scan, so people would follow the protocol that I put.
Yeah.
And I chose to do different methods, and these different methods would enable me to have to estimate the gestational age with different methods, and then I will have the average.
The average age.
One of them is the developing bone. The bone develops inside the womb. The bones will, for example, for the ends of the bone, they will just
like the
start,
joints.
The joint, they will just start as a focus, and from this focus, the bone will just like build and be long enough. And this is what I found. Yes, each one of the ossification center or the developing bone, we know that they appear at a in a timely manner.
Yeah.
Each one appear in certain age, and by knowing this, we can tell at what age they were developing. For example, we know that the ossification or the bony centers at the knee,
Yes.
they develop later at 36 or 37 weeks of gestation in the eighth week, eighth months of pregnancy. Yeah. So in the older one, I see it here. And
so this is baby B.
This baby B, because she's older enough that to have more estimation of the age. So this is baby B, that the ossification centers of the knee, they appear here, denoting that they are at the 8th month or so, and even the teeth buds. Mm-hmm. Even that there are milky teeth, yes, and there is a permanent teeth, but there are also when they first
permanent for some.
When they first appear. So these are the teeth buds. Also, the teeth buds, they have a certain age and mm-hmm. appearances. From all of this, I can estimate the age. Going to another score using what's called Stamfler score, which looks at every tiny bit of bone in the fetus and the way they look. For example, here the wrists, yeah, if they are flat, if they are concave or convex, and each one has a certain age, as well as from the pelvis, as mm-hmm. well as from the ankle and the hind foot, the flatness or the curvature, all this in a certain age. This is a sort of a score having different parameters, put them together, and from there we can tell
you
the
get
age.
your
Yes.
age. Yeah.
So I used different methods. I used from the length of the femoral bone. This is mm-hmm. what we use nowadays to estimate the age for pregnant women.
Okay.
We just measure the length of the femur, mm-hmm. and from the charts we go and check for the age. I use that for the fetus of Tutankhamun as the modern ones. But not only that, I used also the appearance of the bony centers, which mm-hmm. timely appearance. I use Olsen score of ossification, and I use also the morphological appearance of the bone, what's called the Stamford radiographic score. Each one accordingly gave me mm-hmm. an estimation of the age, and from that I can tell that baby A, which is the smaller one, mm-hmm. which is really small, 24.6 yes, week, and the bigger one is about 36.8, about from 36 to 37 weeks. So we are talking about 6 months and 8 to 9 months mm-hmm. of gestation.
We can see how long Ankhesenamun was pregnant for.
Yes.
She's the mother.
This is true.
The Amarna period faced many problems. Akhenaten's wish to keep the royal family line pure by only reproducing with royals and within his own family would have caused major issues, as we know the results of inbreeding. We can see the evidence of this in the artistic depictions of the family members and children of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. They are all shown with strange, elongated skulls. We know Akhenaten tried to conceive children with at least 2 of his own daughters, resulting in the premature deaths of those inbred father-daughter children. Although many have dismissed these elongated heads merely as an art style of the Amarna period, yet when we look at the mummy of Tutankhamun, these deformities from inbreeding are evident, and this appears to have carried on to Tut and his sister wife's children.
Another thing that the pictures of the fetuses were there since 1932 when they were were photographed back then, and the
was it by Harry Burton, I believe?
Oh yes,
for Howard Carter's
yeah.
photographer.
He actually he covered all
the whole tomb.
The tomb. Since then, this picture of the older fetus, baby B, just like
went viral.
Yeah, went viral about its appearance, especially the shape of the head that with the almond-shaped eyes, just like as if it is an alien. Especially when the meteoritic daggers of Tutankhamun were found.
Now they're aliens.
Now they were aliens, and this is actually here from Daily Star, and here from another news that was just like discussing that the aliens. So this was also one of the questions I have to answer.
This alien conspiracy about baby B. This is something you and I had discussed when we were working on our special project that we'll reveal soon, because they're not aliens. This is just a really strange angle, because your CT scans could help prove.
This one of the stories that I had to work on, the alien fetuses that have been in news. I want to just
disprove it
or prove it as a scientific word. But actually, when we look at the CT scan, the three-dimensional CT scan in the front and in the side, this tower-like appearance of the skull was only just the fracture of the skull. See here,
because her face has fallen down.
Yes, yeah. The face has fallen down. This gives this funny,
short face,
funny
long
appearance,
head.
and the long head.
And even the angle of the original picture from the 20s, the head seems to be facing further down.
Probably
your CT scans actually show that her jaw is not that pointed. She actually has a flatter jaw.
Yeah. It's this position that the head is tilted a little bit.
Yeah.
This is the normal position for the mummification, which is like tilting
a little forward.
Tilting a little forward. At that time when the picture was taken, it was not deteriorated. So there were no all these fractures. But this is the funny way that the photograph picture was taken, and the CT scan, the towering is not a real towering, but actually fracture.
Yeah.
So another thing that happened in the previous examination of the bigger fetus, fetus B in 1979, but at that time it was only by X-ray.
Yeah.
By X-ray, the scientists at that time they found that the shoulder of the baby, left shoulder, is high up, and so they considered
like a malformation.
It is sort of malformation. We call this Springle's shoulder. So she's a malformed one. And then they looked at the spine and they said, okay, the spine is open, so this is a sort of open spine, and there will be protrusion of the cord, and this is an anomaly.
Yeah.
This was what the X-ray said, but what the CT said, that the left shoulder is high up because it's actually broken
from moving.
It's broken and moved a bit from the rest of the body. That's why it looked higher. And then you look here that the spine was actually broken.
Yeah.
So it looks like it is open. It's nothing.
Not.
It's not.
It's from transporting these fragile little mummies.
Yes, true, and from the faulty storage.
Yeah.
So in this case, we would say I refute the congenital anomalies described by the X-ray taken earlier.
Yeah.
And
they are inbred children.
They are,
but
and
they are not.
So we expect malformation.
Yeah.
But actually,
not as bad.
I couldn't find malformation.
Okay.
Yeah.
At all. Yeah.
Yeah, but just remember that the mummification, the way that the body is preserved, that important viscera and organs are not kept. So if there are, for example, internal cause of the death, I would not know that. But from what appears to me, that the bones they do not show anomalies from the skull or so. So I refuted the congenital anomalies, unlike the father.
Yeah.
Unlike the father, Tutankhamun had
some problems.
Had some problems in his left foot. He has club foot, and he has a problem in his toes.
The cleft in the mouth.
Yeah, and the roof of the mouth, it has an opening or a defect. The kids are not like that. The things also that I want to know, what kind of mummification would a fetus get?
Is it on the same level as a pharaoh?
Yeah, or just like wrapping them and placing them.
Yeah.
Or
what knowledge did they have?
Yes. Yeah. The external appearance of these coffins, that they were two nested coffins. An outer coffin that it was in black resin, painted in black resin with golden strips and with a wig like appearance of the
similar to Tut's great grandparents, Tuya and Yuya.
Yes, definitely.
Their sarcophagi are done in that style.
Definitely, not only outer coffin, but there's also an inner coffin that is all covered with golden foil, in also a nice way, with an eyeliner.
Care was taken.
Yes, a lot. Yeah. Not only that, but the wrapped mummies were covered with a golden mask.
So they were recognized already by the gods.
Yes. Yeah. And this is true, because what is written on the outer coffin is the Osiris. So they were not given a name, but they were recognized by Osiris.
Yeah.
This appearance would tell you that it is a royal style of mummification from the external wrapping. What about the internal? Usually the mummies, for example, their father Tutankhamun, he was subjected to brain treatment, not only with one level of resin like the other mummies, but with two levels of resin, that with an extra care. And the other thing, that all the viscera or the internal organs were taken of the Tutankhamun, and this is important. Brain treatment in Tutankhamun, and there was also evisceration or removal of the internal organs. When the fetuses had the same treatment as their father, or they were just, let's see. This is what the CT scan showed me. In the smaller baby A, there were inside the skull, there were dense material.
Like a resin.
Like a resin or so. This indicates that this was maybe a sort of a brain treatment. The condition was not good, unfortunately, with the faulty storage. But despite of that, this, as a scientist, would give me a hint of a sort of treatment. But when I looked inside the body, inside the torso, there were packs. There were packs inside, well-formed packs, denoting that there were sort of treatment, unlike what Derry said. Douglas Derry, when he
said they weren't treated,
because he couldn't find by his eye that there was an opening, but maybe it was just a tiny opening that he did all this. So visually he could not see, but from inside, I would tell you, these were mummified.
They were prepared
artificially. They were prepared. For the older one, I can tell more, because it's a bigger body. And definitely there was this opening on the left side of the lower abdomen, where all the organs were taken off, and her father also had a similar one going from his umbilical, from the umbilicus going down, going outward. So similar thing, and from there the organs were taken, and I can see even the visceral packs inside the body.
The cavity doesn't collapse when the mummy decays.
This is true. It's not only the functional issue of taking the organs out, but also the beautification issue, that to keep the body well formed and as a whole by placing organs and placing the visceral packs, and these visceral packs also will just get any moisture or anything.
So the mummies were prepared as royals. Yeah.
Similar to their father.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not like a magic issue. They were not placed to be votive mummies.
These were his children that he wanted with him.
Yes, that's very much true. And this is just like to remind you the mummification that Tutankhamun received, the brain mummification, as well as the removal of the viscera. And here you can see even the packs, similar to
inside his torso.
And the two resin levels inside the skull, very unique.
You showed me this CT scan, and this is the best CT scan I have ever seen of inside Tutankhamun's head.
This is what I do, is to manipulate the image in order and to cut open the skull in order to see what is inside, and this is all virtually. We are keeping the mummy intact. This is totally non-invasive. But despite of that, I make a cut in order to see what is inside the skull. The DNA testing actually showed that the relationship between the two fetuses and Tutankhamun is father-daughter relationship with a very high
99.9%.
And likely the mother was KV21A, was an Ankhesenamun. You know, Curtis, that knowing that Tutankhamun was always depicted as a loving husband, always with his wife, touching
each other, pouring wine.
Yeah. So we know that this affection, and we know now that these children were children of love.
Yeah.
They were just conceived with a lot of love between the husband and wife. But also now we know that of their death. We know how the couple endured the pain of losing children, especially not once but twice, and especially after 6 months of waiting for the child, and just like very close, before the full birth. 8 months or 9 months for the older one. You see how the pain, and that's why maybe all these drawings that we see the couple comforting each other. Maybe
not just for the loss of the parents, the change of religion, the moving back from your hometown, but for their children.
Yeah, and also from all the duties that the child and the teenager Tutankhamun, the king, has to take care of the huge rich country. But from not only comforting from that, but also comforting from the grief. Maybe Tutankhamun was affected more, but because it seems that the wife was the one just approaching or touching. Maybe
she was the stronger one.
Yeah. So that's why it was important now to look at Tutankhamun not only as a husband, but now as a grieving father.
This has been a long process for you from 2008.
Yeah.
to...
It took me several years in order to put together the methodology and to be the standard for any other CT scan of a mummified fetus. And this what really happened, because the Maidstone Museum in UK, they had this tiny mummy in the in the shape of a hawk, and they thought that it was a primate. And when it was sent to me, I realized that it was a mummified fetus. So
but deformed.
Yeah, but deformed fetus with no head. So that would what made this appearance. But because I had put the methodology of how to study, to examine, and to interpret a mummified fetus, now we can examine.
There's a method
more.
To do it.
I even published that in my book, Scanning the Fetuses, co-authored with Dr. Zahid Hawass. Children were very important as part of the family. Even they were called the staff of old age.
Yeah.
Ancient Egyptians, they invested in their children. They took care of their children because they knew that the children
would take care of them
in the older life. So that's why it was very important. They recognized the pregnancy, and they have a deity.
Yes.
For pregnancy, and they have it in the form of hippopotamus lactating breasts, having
pregnant stomach.
Yes, and with her clothes in order to fight for any enemies of the mother and for her coming child, and carrying the ankh, the symbol of life, in her hands, giving it. So that's why pregnancy was really important for ancient Egyptians.
Yeah.
And fetus in ancient Egypt was recognized as an identity. It's even something that we lack in our modern laws.
Yeah.
Modern laws, the fetus is not recognized as in ancient Egypt. It was.
Before it was born, it was recognized already.
Because let me read this prayer that told to the mother during giving birth. Amun, make the heart of the deliverer strong, and keep alive the one that is coming. The fetus is still in her womb. It's recognized as the one that is coming. So that's how ancient Egyptians recognized the fetus, and so it is just logic that a miscarriage was considered as a death in the family that was mourning. Now there are few fetuses, mummified fetuses recognized from ancient Egypt. The one in Maidstone Museum that we have just seen, with the anencephaly or absent of head. And there's another one with a similar deformity from Tuna El Gabal. Yes, and another one from Lorette and Gillard, also with malforming. So this is the beauty of ancient Egypt, who recognize children as important part of the family, recognize even fetuses as a member worthy of living, and recognize even here even malformed fetuses as soul worth living.
Exactly. That's incredible. It's incredible to learn about these little people that didn't get to live their lives.
This is true, and it's amazing how science give you an information about how people who lived thousands of years ago, how they were thinking, and even the moments of their life, the moments of joy and the moments of sorrow and sadness.
Yeah. Well, you set me a challenge a few months ago, and we've been working on this to show what Tut's children could have looked like.
Yeah, because we did before the reconstruction of the face of a great king, Amenhotep I, that was totally wrapped, never being unwrapped. Nobody ever saw his face, but I could see the face with the unwrapping with the three-dimensional CT scan.
Yeah.
And you even put a face on that, and you had a nice facial reconstruction. And I was wondering if this could be true for two little tiny
people
at that time. So what do you have for me?
So we've been working for a couple months. You gave me information about the age, some information about how the bodies were formed, and obviously your CT scans. So from all angles, I had all of this information to work with. You've seen a little bit of the reconstruction of these babies, but you haven't seen it completed.
Yes, please.
So for now, I have something very special to show to you.
I can't wait.
Hopefully, this can give a face to the children of Tutankhamun. This is baby A.
Hey, yeah, little tiny one.
Yeah. When you see the little eyelashes, very small.
Yes, yeah.
Eyebrows, and you can see this. The head is.
Yes.
It's a normal baby's head.
It's normal baby head, and the mouth and the nose. Yes, it's so nice.
And the veins, because I've never reconstructed a baby. And for a baby at that age...
It was a challenge for you.
I had to do a lot of research about it. And, you know, you have these veins on the babies and the skin that is sort of wrinkled. They weren't a smooth, tight face.
True.
So I hope that this lives up to your...
Very much like I know her CT scan. I saw the CT scan. But to put a face on the mummy, this is amazing because it's a way that you can communicate better.
Yeah.
It's no more an object.
Yeah, it's a person.
It's a person. Now it's a human that you can communicate with. Yeah. It's amazing.
And I have a surprise.
Yes.
Because this is how the child would have been at death. But I thought it would be a great idea to see what the child could have looked like had she lived a few months longer. So we can reveal to you the face. That's baby A,
what
the little
amazing princess with the eyeliner and with yes, and
because we have
the accessories, tiny hair. And she's amazing.
She has Queen T's mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Her grandmother's mouth. Yes. We have the images of the two children from Amarna. And I thought, well, that's how these children would have dressed at that time. So
this is really amazing. And this is how a fetus would have looked like. And this is how a few months later, if she managed to live, but she did not, unfortunately, she would have been a
beautiful little
girl, totally Egyptian girl with the
with her eyeliner, her jewelry.
Yeah, definitely, I see faces like hers among the children in my family, in my street. She's so Egyptian.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. What a beautiful.
Well, that's not all. That's not all.
Oh.
We have baby B.
Oh.
And this is baby B. Baby B.
Oh,
The alien baby.
The alien. Okay, no, totally, just like with a normal appearance of the head, and you took this shape from the
CT scan.
The CT scan.
So for her mummy, it was a bit more difficult because we had this strange reference image, and then we had your CT scan, and I put your CT scan over the reference image, lining up with the shoulders and the chin.
Yeah.
And I was able to see that indeed is a very strange angle for a picture.
As if I'm looking like that.
Yeah, and if you take a picture of anybody from that angle, it's gonna look very sharp.
And the head would look bigger than usual from
In fact, she didn't have that. I had to reconstruct her skull. So I took your CT scan. I had to put her skull back together at the top, like a little ancient Egyptian puzzle. And yeah, she has a very straight jaw, actually straighter than her sister.
Yeah, that's amazing, because we can still have outlining of the jaw, despite of the bad preservation or conservation.
Yeah, and she has the shoulder that we were talking about.
Yeah.
So just slightly raised. So that's her.
That's amazing.
And go ahead and have a look how she would have looked had she lived.
Wow, a beautiful one, with open eyes and with nice and accessories and with eyebrow. Yeah, she looks very amazing.
Yeah.
But you know, Curtis, that when it was first unwrapped in 1932 by Douglas Derry, and in his notes he wrote that this baby had open eyes, eyelashes, and eyebrow. She was almost
perfect,
full term, almost full term. And they kept her with open eyes. So this would have been how she looked like months
a few months later.
Yeah, and quite similar.
You can see the two.
Yeah, to her sister. But maybe this is what you gave her more personality.
A little, but what I did notice with baby B, she did have a slight problem with her nose, because there is one side of her nose that is a little drooping and a little larger. So she did have some deformation in the face. Yeah.
But again, this is the best that can be taken from the actual CT scan and from the actual picture. So this is not fiction. This actually it is based on evidences.
It might not be the exact faces, but this allows us to imagine what they could have looked like.
Yes, and with from bases, and the bases are
the basis is scientific.
Yes, because this come from scientific basis. That's really amazing, and that's really art with science, with passion. This really the nice story of
two princesses.
Of Archaeology, and two princesses.
Yeah.
And their father and mother and the whole family.
The whole family.
We now
if they had lived, history would be very different.
This is very much true. This is very much true. Maybe one of them would have been the queen, and we wouldn't have the problem with Hur Muhib and and all this problem. This would be, and maybe in their lineage there would be no Dynasty 19.
There would be no Ramses.
Yeah, there were no Ramses. So yeah, this is very much true.
Yeah,
it's amazing piece of information that adds a lot to our understanding of history and to this golden era.
Yeah. Well, I hope that this helps you to feel more connected to them.
And every one of us would be more connected to the little royal princesses, to their father and mother.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. It's
thank you.
Challenge accepted, and you succeeded.
I was so nervous. I've never reconstructed a child.
Yeah.
So thank you for the challenge.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And yes, you did it very well. I'm so happy with your work. Thank you.
And finding the Muffy. That's horrible. There have been muffs found, but anyway, finding the mummy of Nefertiti, what could it potentially teach us?